Wow, StreamYard sucks. Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I hope you guys are doing all right this morning. StreamYard has a bug in it. It bugs the hell out of me. And it's bringing me back to my days as a software engineer. When you are doing software, you do these periodic updates. They're code stuff that you do. And oftentimes when you're building stuff like a console, let's say StreamYard, for example, you have updates to the console. You may move stuff around. You may add new operations, all of these things. And all of these things are basically just code that you are telling what to do. Sometimes you F it up. It screws up the process. And not just screws up the process, it makes it where stuff that worked prior no longer works. Now, as a software engineer, you don't know that until somebody complains about that. And I guess this is me complaining about it. I want to run this real quick. I haven't talked about this over the course of the time of the show because, got to be honest, for me, it wasn't a thing until it was actually a thing. But many other channels have been hitting on this. So I do want to, I guess, add my 2 cents into this. And I'm going to talk to Caleb about this a little bit later in the show. This is Donald Trump talking about tomahawks. I don't think this is an issue until this is an issue. But let's play it out.
On whether to supply Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine or sell them to NATO and let them sell them to Ukraine.
Yeah, I've sort of made a decision pretty much. If you consider, I think I want to find out what they're doing with them.
Yes.
You know, where are they sending them? I guess I'd have to ask that question. That war should never have started.
These are such dumb comments. Hey, Trump. Have you made a decision on what you're going to do about the Tomahawks? Meaning, are you going to send the Tomahawks to Ukraine? Yeah, maybe I think I've come to some kind of consensus or some conclusion about it. I kind of want to figure out what they're going to do with them. What do you think they're going to do with them? And to be very clear, it is not them doing anything with it. It is you doing something with it because it would take the United States to fire those Tomahawks. So there will be the U.S. firing Tomahawk missiles directly into Russia. Let's just be very clear. So I think it seems as if Donald Trump has gotten so fluent in just making it up as he goes along that he believes that other people who are also, let's say, a party to the conflict listens to what he says in that context. And they don't. Putin has already made it very clear. This would be a massive escalation. Any notion of relationship between the United States would be over with. And if you remember, the first time this came up with the Biden administration, he was even clearer. This would be the United States firing missiles into Russia, and we will respond accordingly. Period. So for Trump to say, well, I think I may have made a choice. I don't know where, I just kind of want to know where they're going to send them. And then to follow it up with, I'm not seeking escalation, or to follow it up with, this is not my war. It is your war. It's your war. You're what, 6-7 months in? It's your war. And more to the point, there was a paper that came out, I think it was the Telegraph earlier today, that pointed out that even if those missiles went to Ukraine, Ukraine wouldn't have the ability to fire those missiles. And that's assuming they even get them in any kind of time frame because, of course, backlogs. So, again, for me, I didn't pay a huge amount of attention to this because it wasn't an issue until it's actually an issue. Until those missiles are sent and until those missiles are fired, it doesn't entirely matter to me. When those missiles are sent, when those missiles are fired, and all hell breaks loose, that's when it's an issue. Again, we will have to see whether those things are even sent. It's very possible, and a lot of this, I think, has to do with Donald Trump doing everything in his power to find some level of leverage. And he's been unable to find any kind of leverage. So even if, and I'm putting a huge helping on even if, Donald Trump wanted to have some kind of deal or wanted to make some kind of agreement or whatever else, obviously he wants to make it that is in the best light of America, considering it's America's war. Well, you need leverage to do that. And if you don't have any cards, then you don't have any cards. And so whether it's, let's attack the oil infrastructure. And then, of course, when Russia responds, Zelensky comes crying, screaming for an air ceasefire. Then it's, well, let's go after tankers. Let's go after oil revenue by getting Europe to not buy Russian energy. All of these things are a search for relevance and irrelevance that up to this point, the U.S. has not been able to find, in which case Russia continues and proceeds on its war effort. Tomahawks is the latest bluster, bluff, threat. And again, I'm calling it a bluff and a threat up to the point where it's not. So that's him talking about it. Is he being serious? Who knows? It's Trump. He lies as easily as he breathes. And a man who's failing miserably at a war that he could end tomorrow just by saying this was done. You're no longer getting money, intelligence, etc. We're pulling out the CIA. We're out. He doesn't do it. It's his war. You may not want to own it. It's his war. Nothing Trump does is going to stop Russia from pursuing its objectives because its objectives are existential. Full stop. Full stop. The other thing that I want to hit today is Chicago. I'm going to talk to that with Garland Nixon. Garland is going to be here at 9:15. Garland used to be a police officer. So of all the people to talk to, he would be one of the best people in the world to hit on that particular issue. I have to be honest. I didn't realize how bad things were. Meaning, you're sending a bunch of brown shirts into communities across the United States, Democratic strongholds, under this fake argument that things are so insane at those locations that you may need to invoke the Insurrection Act. Okay, this is outrageous. And the cultists and the fascists that thinks this is perfectly okay, they're out of their mind. There's nobody that sees this that cares one iota for America. What they care about is power and gaining some level of power with people who they consider to be on their side. This will fundamentally change what this country is. And again, I've given the prediction that all of this is going to collapse. I don't know what it's going to collapse into, but this country is going to be something fundamentally different. I give it 10 years, whether I'm here or not. I give it 10 years. If it doesn't happen in 10 years, I come back and be like, hey, I got it wrong. I don't think I am getting this wrong. There seems to be a fundamental breakdown in just basic things. I mean, as we have this conversation right now, the government is literally shut down. Can't pass a budget. Can't do basic things. So building high-speed rail, that seems to be beyond that capability. Cutting the budget for NASA. Again, that means something. There's a symbolic element to that. This idea of this inability or even turning away from looking out into bigger and larger things other than our basic domestic political situation or our domestic situation. That means something. There's an implication in that. That's what Bill Nye crying on, I think it was CNN about it. Bill, I agree with you, but that is the least of our issues. But it is illustrative of something. I'm saying that when you have a political system that can't do basic things, that has gotten to the point of just being a cash grab, a blatant oligarchy, then you've hit a particular point in your, let's say, political space that either you need to turn back when you see the sign that says, don't go beyond this point, or you go beyond that point, and your country becomes something fundamentally different. And that's what I think we are. I could be wrong on that. When Ward was on the show, Ward pointed out that he thought 20 years ago that we had reached that point. And here we are 20 years later where he's like, not so much. We'll see. The other thing I want to hit is 9/11. Tucker Carlson has been doing God's work. Can't believe I'm saying it. Tucker Carlson is a national treasure. I have to be honest on this. I have been one of those people that have been very skeptical of the story that has been given for 9/11, especially with building 7 falling on its own. By the same token, not in this mindset that the U.S. government had anything to do with it. What Tucker is explaining is troubling, it's worrying. The fact that president after president have come behind George Bush and did nothing on this is that much more deleterious to the integrity of the nation itself. Somebody obviously knew that the attacks were going to come. Shorting airline stocks is a clear indication that somebody knew. By the same token, the level of absurdity in the government on this issue with all of the warnings that were taking place, it's disturbing, to put it mildly. The cover-up is disturbing. And none of the other administration seems to care. And all of this stuff was effectively swept under the rug. Tucker Carlson on this have been doing God's work. He gets all the credit for it. I'm going to bring in my guests. Him and I think Piers may go a little further than I am on this, but I have been brought around Piers, kicking and screaming, to pay more attention to this issue. How you doing, man? You doing okay today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing fine. I'm joined with Piers Robinson. Piers Robinson is co-director of the Organization for Propaganda Studies. You can follow him on Twitter at Piers Robinson. Piers, where else can people find you, by the way, just so they know?
Well, I'm also the research director for the International Center for 9/11 Justice, and that has a website and a YouTube channel and a Twitter handle. I'm also co-editor of the Journal of 9/11 Studies, which is connected to International Center for 9/11 Justice, which has about 100 odd academic papers on the 9/11 issue. And also, of course, I'm co-editor of Propaganda in Focus, which publishes a wide range of articles on issues related to propaganda. So people can find sort of my work or my editorial work across all of those different formats.
Excellent. I want to show you a clip. In fact, I think I have 3 total. I'm not going to play all of them at once, but I do want to get your take on this. This is one of the, I guess, the CIA guy. Listen to what he says here. Tucker makes the point of saying that 2 Al-Qaeda members were being tracked all across the world by the U.S. And in being tracked, they lost track of him in one location, but eventually found him, and he ended up like in California. Listen to this. This is just amazing that all of this was covered up.
Hijackers were moving. On January 8th, 2000, CIA surveillance teams reported that Al-Midhar had boarded a flight to Bangkok, Thailand. He was accompanied by a man they identified as Al-Hazmi. According to the official account, this is where the trail went cold. The CIA placed their names on a watch list and asked that Thai authorities track their movements. 3 months later, the Thai government reported back. Al-Hazmi had boarded a United Airlines flight to Los Angeles. Al-Midhar was with him. The 2 hijackers had arrived in the United States.
But here's my problem with this whole fucking thing and the whole subsequent investigation of 9/11. You have the CIA then following one man and then 2 men all over the planet, and then eventually even to America, right? Landing in Los Angeles, California, and you don't tell the FBI.
Piers, one more clip, 1428. And I want to get your take on this. I know you're further. You go further on this than I do, but that's okay. All of this is problematic, to put it mildly, and all of this was covered up.
CIA had this delusional grand plan. So the CIA, with their information that they had from the Hatta House and their own psychological analysis of everybody in that team, they figured the best way is maybe to recruit somebody who came over from Malaysia. Called Al-Midhar and now Al-Hazmi. We kept the FBI at bay because we told Mark Rossini and Doug Miller to shut the fuck up. So let's just try to get inside there. And that's what went wrong. That was the grand lie, the grand risk, the grand delusion. You had a duty to protect Americans, and you failed because of your fucking fantastical delusion that you could recruit somebody inside the cell.
The official not.
So he's making the argument, basically, the CIA was trying to recruit various people to get information on Al-Qaeda. And in trying to get this information, they thought, well, if we allow terrorists into the country and we can flip those terrorists, then when those terrorists apparently, ostensibly, I guess, go back, then we would have a mole into the organization itself. And apparently, he's arguing that this was a royal F-up, that they didn't alert the FBI, they alerted the FBI at the last minute, up until the point where it was too late to effectively do anything, in which case we get hit because CIA F's it up. And then immediately after, went into a grand scheme of covering all of this up. Give me your take on that.
Well, that's certainly his interpretation of events. And of course, he dominated in the first episode of Tucker Carlson's series on 9/11. And in a way, we've known for quite some time that the CIA had contact with the alleged hijackers. We know the Able Danger operation, which Tony Schaefer was involved in, that the CIA were tracking all of the alleged hijackers. There were various blocks within the FBI from being able to arrest them. For example, Colleen Rowley was an early whistleblower from the FBI who explained that she was trying to actually apprehend two of the alleged hijackers, but she was prevented from doing so. And so what that picture essentially paints is this knowledge, this CIA intelligence knowledge of the alleged hijackers. The interpretation in that first documentary is that, as you say, this was a catastrophic cock-up by the CIA, so to speak.
Yes.
I mean, my interpretation of this in tandem with all of the other evidence that we have in relation to 9/11 is that there's something more nefarious going on. That the CIA was involved, and there's a lot of material on this in public domain. For example, the hijackers getting given visas to get into the US from a Saudi station, and that was being sort of green lighted into the US. The Prince Bandar, the Saudi official, being involved with contacts with the alleged hijackers, and of course Prince Bandar was very close to the Bush administration, and so there is this network backdrop to what we know about 9/11, about these alleged hijackers and their connections with Saudi Arabia and their connections with the CIA. I think actually Kit Clarenberg published in Grayzone a couple of years ago the latest information about the connection between the CIA and two of the alleged hijackers. And so, yes, what you have there is all, I think, all the indicators, as I'm suggesting, of an operation which the intelligence services were fully aware of what was going on. And it can be, and I know Tucker Carlson has been careful at how he pitches his series. Some interpret this as a cock-up, but others interpret as, no, this was deliberate and intentional. And in a broad sense, I guess that episode fits into this theory or this argument out there that this was a let it happen event, that it was a managed war trigger, that there was awareness that this attack was going to come, and it was used and then exploited in order to get the global war on terror going, of course. But let it happen, the other, and we'll get to that in a minute, I guess, the other major theory there is that it's not just a case of letting it happen. It's actually, this has been instigated by essentially deep state actors, not just in the West, but also in other countries, as part of essentially a black operation, a covert operation designed to help mobilize the American public to go to war in the context of global war on terror. But certainly all of the evidence that I think that Tucker Carlson puts up in the first episode is certainly, for those who want to go with the limited let it happen theory, it provides some pretty solid sort of evidence in support of that analysis.
Well, the third episode goes. You can look at the third episode and come to the conclusion that they let it happen, and what I mean by that is this. So Tucker in the third episode points out all of the situations, like meaning all of these warning signs. Like, we found people taking air flights. We found, meaning they were getting just warning signs, and the Bush administration was like, yeah, that's okay, effectively blowing off all of the warnings that were effectively going on. And I gotta be, again, I didn't realize how significant this is. I knew about the last one where they went to the Bush administration, was like, hey, we're getting signs about Al-Qaeda. And it was like, don't tell me about Al-Qaeda anymore. I don't want to hear anything about it. Listen to this, though.
Signs of an impending attack in the United States came in the summer of 2001, just months or weeks before. On April 20th, 2001, a briefing to top Bush administration officials noted that bin Laden planned multiple operations. In May 2001, a report was distributed to Bush administration officials noting that bin Laden public profile may presage attack. On May 16th, 2001, an intel report mentioned a phone call to an embassy that bin Laden's supporters were planning an attack inside the United States. On June 12th, a CIA report indicated that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was recruiting people to travel to the U.S., possibly to aid in terror attacks. On June 22nd of that year, the CIA notified station chiefs about intelligence suggesting an al-Qaeda suicide bombing in the United States could be on the way. At about the same time, U.S. intelligence issued a terror advisory threat indicating a high probability of near-term spectacular terrorist attacks resulting in numerous casualties. On June 25th, George W. Bush's counterterrorism czar Richard Clarke told Condoleezza Rice that 6 intelligence reports showed al-Qaeda personnel warning of an impending terror attack. 3 days later, he told Rice that something very, 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 very big was about to happen.
This is amazing. like when you think about it, it's like, okay, so you guys were getting all of these indications and nobody did anything about it, which goes to the idea of, again, it seems like somebody let it happen. And, you know, I think Tucker pointed out people were betting against airlines and they hid the people who were betting against those airlines, meaning somebody knew something was going to take place and they didn't seem to move on this in any real tangible way. How do you, I mean, give me your thoughts on this. Is it, because I think,
Well,
let me ask you this.
Sorry.
The
please.
third
Episode is sorry. Okay. The third episode does do a reasonably good job of showing all of the occasions where the opportunity, so to speak, to take out al-Qaeda was simply turned down. And this is going on during the Clinton administration. And then it goes into this period in the run-up to 9/11. You have these warnings simply being ignored. And, you know, as this is very clear evidence that there was knowledge that this was going to happen. The put options, the informed trading reference you just made, I mean, yes, this has been known for a long time that there were people who were placing bets on shares, American Airlines and United Airlines going down at the point of 9/11. The 9/11 Commission even noted that it identified one of the individuals responsible for those trades, but because they had no possible connection of al-Qaeda, they didn't pursue it any further, which of course is an absurd response to that. You'd want to investigate that person.
Wow.
And how it was that they knew that this attack was going to occur. So you've got that very solid evidence with foreknowledge that they knew that these attacks were going to occur, coupled with all of these sort of, you know, as it were, blatant disregard of these warnings which were coming up through the system. This was something which they wanted to happen. And for sure, the third episode does a very good job of that. I think that, you know, all of this obviously fits into this kind of notion of, okay, it could be a CIA operation which has gone wrong, it's gone out of control, and then they just let it happen, and so on. But it's still very much something which is being organized external to the US. And I think, as people will see when they get to Tucker Carlson's 4th episode, when he talks about World Trade Center 7, which you've mentioned, that's where I think, you know, is a very useful place for people to sort of start in a way, in order to try and understand the totality of the 9/11 event. Because as soon as you sort of start looking at the issues surrounding World Trade Center 7, there's not just a foreknowledge issue going on here. What you have is, of course, you have the third building in New York on that day, which collapsed 5 hours after the towers came down, and it wasn't hit by an aeroplane. And of course, you know, as has been researched exhaustively for many years now, and the University of Alaska at Fairbanks is the latest big study on it. This
Piers,
building
I have to
collapses.
interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt. Sorry. Is there any way you can get closer to the mic? They're saying that the audio is dodgy.
Yeah, sure. How's that? Is that audio better?
Much better. Thank you.
Much better. Right. Okay. I'll try and stay this close to the mic. So the issue with the World Trade Center 7 and the free fall collapse. I mean, what free fall means is that the building's coming down for the first 2.5 seconds at free fall speed, as though there's no resistance beneath, as a ball would drop if you drop the ball. And of course, building to fall at free fall speed, it means that all of the underlying structure has to give way at the same time. Yeah, there has been no resistance to the building. And of course, that's in a sense, this is a smoking gun, that this is a controlled demolition, that the building has been deliberately brought down through explosives or through whatever mechanism. And that's why it goes into free fall, and also falls symmetrically as well into its own footprint. Yeah. And so, of course, as soon as one starts to understand the physics surrounding this, I remember having a conversation with a friend who's an architect who was saying, well, yeah, obviously they brought this building down, but they brought the building down because it was unstable and so on, and it was a danger. And I pointed out to this architect, well, but how did they wire the building within 5 hours? And he couldn't understand. He couldn't continue the conversation, because obviously, if Building 7 is controlled demolition, this must be something which is planned in advance. So all of that points towards this is not just a let it happen, letting an Al-Qaeda operation carry through the attacks on Twin Towers. This is something which has been organized much closer to home, because unless you run with a rather fantastical theory that Al-Qaeda had access into World Trade Center 7 and were wiring it with explosives, which no one plausibly thinks that's the case, this points towards, again, a black operation, a covert deep state operation. And that building was brought down. And it is a good place to start, because the physics is not particularly complex for people who aren't versed in physics or the hard sciences. And they can understand how structurally this building, the only way for it to suddenly drop in that way is if all the support's removed, and if all the support columns are removed at the same time, and that means something very deliberate is being done to bring the building down. But as soon as you realize that, I think, mentally, then the door opens to understanding this is an instigated, a manufactured war trigger involving deep state actors. It's a difficult bump to get over, and I fully understand that. And it's a bump which I didn't get over for a very, very long time. I was an academic working in the field of international politics, and I wasn't going anywhere close to this issue and so on. But when you realize essentially the facts of the case, whether it's the World Trade Center 7 or the backdrop, CIA knowledge, contact with the alleged hijackers, once you put all those things together, factually, that this is probably what happened. And then it's this kind of, well, how on earth would they dare do something so horrendous? And of course, then you realize, well, okay, we know, and this isn't really controversial anymore, we know that 9/11 was the trigger for the global war on terror and multiple regime change. Noam Chomsky doesn't dispute that. That's well established. Mm-hmm. This wasn't just one war they had to mobilize the public for. This was multiple wars in the international system, and wars which haven't stopped, of course, because Iran was on that list of countries that they were planning to hit in the 90s and through into the immediate post 9/11 era. So you need huge conflicts in the international system. So you need a major false flag in order to do that. And then this other kind of psychological bump is, how would even people within our deep state dare to do that? Well, we have been here before. Most people, or a lot of people now understand what happened with the JFK assassination. That this was the CIA was involved in the assassination of a popular US president in broad daylight, sitting next to his wife in a horrific, ambush essentially. And so, we have a deep state which is capable of some pretty nefarious acts. And so I think, you get to this bump which you get over, and you recognize that, you realize that this has happened before, you realize that the facts of the matter point directly towards, essentially an instigated false flag, and then you deal with it, and then you move on. It's difficult and it's big, but look at the world we're living in. Look at what Israel's doing to the Palestinians. This is a genocide that's going on. I saw that you're interviewing Kit about Charlie Kirk, and of course, I'm not following that closely, but there's a huge amount of controversy over exactly what is going on in relation to that. We are living in an era with the kind of this moment of Western edge of decline for the empire. We're living in an era of tremendous deception and political flux and extreme actions as well. So I think, bringing that into bear on the analysis, in a way, 9/11 becomes much less surprising to understand it as, in a sense, our worst fears, that this was something, these were people from within our own political system who were involved in doing this, not this bin Laden out in a cave in Afghanistan and so on. But, and it becomes, unpleasantly but realistic to understand that that's what happened and so on.
Yeah, Building 7 is hard to get around. Like, if nothing else,
it is.
When I saw Building 7, I was like, nothing hit that building. How did that building collapse? And then, of course, you get engineers coming saying, well, the way this building collapsed was because shrapnel hit it, and there was low burning fires. And when the low burning fires hit, it's like, okay, dude, just stop. Like, like even if that's true, I don't believe that, right?
There's plenty of people out there offering these theories which try to explain the official narrative. It's interesting that when one has sort of dealt with Building 7 and one moves to, for example, the Twin Towers, or WTC 1 and 2, and their collapse, it was an American scientist, Bazant, who wrote the explanation for the collapse of those buildings, and the mathematical calculations were done and completed and submitted to a journal effectively within 2 days of 9/11 occurring. And that was presented as the official explanation for why the towers, having received damage from the aircraft impacts, then collapsed entirely. And his theory has been, discredited since then, but it was very rapidly put out into the public domain. Mm-hmm. But the issues of the Twin Towers are not that different from the World Trade Center 7, in the sense that what one has to think about is just the physics of what one is observing when the towers come down. You're talking about the top section of the tower starts to descend, and then it carries on at constant acceleration, 2/3 acceleration due to gravity, all the way down to the bottom. So that tiny section of the top building is destroying an entirely intact building beneath. This is a violation of Newtonian physics. This is not possible unless there is actual action being taken to remove the floors below to create this collapse of the building. So other just be clear, simple physical things that you see with the tower collapses, you see that the building is going outwards, exploding outwards, and then the gravitational collapse, it would be straight down. It wouldn't be billowing out to either side. And then, of course, when one then takes the time to sort of look a little bit more carefully at the footage, one can start to see that there are explosive blasts which go off far below the collapse line, even really quite close to the base of the building as the building starts to come down. And the obvious explanation for that is these are explosives which are going off early, and the blasts are going off, and you can see them visibly coming out the sides of the building. Of course, when we all saw it at the time, we're shocked and we're horrified, and we believe what we are told. The official narrative: planes hit, buildings weakened, and then they collapsed, and so on. And of course, we believe that, or a lot of us believe that. But when you take a calm, sober, objective look at the buildings, and there's a great video by David Chandler, which is on the web, where he talks you through. He's a physicist. He talks you through what you're seeing as the building comes down. You have this, as I had at the time when it was explained to me what I was, how the buildings were coming down, was this sinking feeling of, yeah, okay, we're not being told the truth about these buildings. This building is not simply collapsing because this tiny section at the top is powering through the rest of the building. It is being explosively destroyed. And again, the implications of that take to a place which is recognizing that, yeah, this is an epic, a huge, but at the end of the day, something which is a familiar, in a sense, military tactic: false flags.
Yeah. Carry
out false flag attacks, self-inflicted wounds, in order to get the population's blood boiling sufficiently to be able to go to war. And I think that's the bottom line.
So how do you view this? You view this as two things are happening at once, or three things. One, the CIA allows people into the country knowing full well what they plan and intend to do. Two, there are explosives that are also rigged to the building. So when the planes hit, the explosives will go off to allow this kind of pancaking effect and basically bring down the towers. And three, somebody fucked up on building 3 or building 7, that they believed or assumed that the building would also get hit. The building didn't get hit, and somebody pulled the trigger in order to bring that building down also. Is that the thought process that you're going with?
I think that the alleged hijackers is a backstory that was created in order to create a plausible narrative blaming Al Qaeda. We don't have time to get into the issues surrounding the aviation side, but it's considered very unlikely that the alleged hijackers would have had the ability to fly the aircraft in the way that they were flown. So you had limited flying experience. There's a whole host of questions around, whether they were actually on the planes, and the lack of confirmed or signed off inventories and so on for passengers. So I think there is a constructed story there with alleged hijackers, and this is an area that the International Centre for 9/11 Justice we're looking at. We're looking at the question of the flights and how these planes came to be flown and the way that they were flown and so on. So I think that's very much sort of a narrative which was constructed. The bottom line, the buildings were wired to be brought down. The cover was effectively, the planes, the alleged hijacking, hijackers point the finger at Al-Qaeda to sort of construct that part of the narrative. I think Building 7 is an interesting question because some people theorize that perhaps it was meant to come down when two towers came down and something went wrong. So they then were left with a standing building, which they wanted to come down. Others have argued that possibly another plane, the fourth plane, which crashed in Pennsylvania, possibly was going to be used to fly into WTC-7. But we don't know for sure. We don't know exactly what was going on. I mean, it is possible that they were expecting to bring that building down as the towers came down, and in the dust which enveloped the whole area, not too many questions would be asked about it. We don't know. All we do know in terms of WTC-7 is that and also the towers, that they had to have been brought down in a deliberate, controlled way through using demolition techniques.
And then, of course, immediately after that, cover up, ramp up to war, do everything in their power to block the 9/11 Commission report, which wasn't a report at all in real terms.
They covered up the 9/11 Commission, and you're right. This is an important point. And this is picking up what I said before. They went straight to war on the day of 9/11. They were identifying multiple countries, that, as Wesley Clark revealed the list, didn't he, several years later, about the list that he'd seen in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. But other officials have said that those lists were in place prior to 9/11. But America was immediately onto a war footing. Afghanistan, then Iraq, and of course, all of those conflicts segued ultimately into what we saw in Libya, what we saw in Syria, and take us up to where we are today, which is still, Iran was always the last country on that list of countries which were discussed for regime change prior to 9/11. And of course, Iran is still in the crosshairs.
What's amazing to me is, I guess people were pissed off. They were bewildered. There was no question about, well, obviously we have to go kill a lot of people because the towers fell. And this project for a new American century became manifest. In which case, as you point out, the goal, in fact, John Kiriakou was on my show. John Kiriakou pointed out that Dick Cheney, in one of the meetings, pointing out that they wanted to be in Iran within 6-7 months and got bogged down in Iraq. And so I understand the point behind this. Like, because some people can say, well, dude, this was 20 years ago. But our current world is effectively set in what happened on 9/11. And, whether they were demolition, whether it was these people were just radically, bizarrely incompetent, whatever that answer is, both of those answers are problematic. It's kind of like when people talk about UFOs. It's like, it's either us or it's not us. Both of those answers are mind-blowing. And it's kind of the same way with this. Whether you go with the Tucker Carlson's point of view that this was a calamitous F-up, and then they try to hide it after they F'd it up, and there's been no accountability for it, and there's been no real investigation into it. Or whether they take your point of view of, well, they obviously planned this. These buildings were obviously taken down, all for the entire point of what they ended up doing anyway, which was effectively creating a pretext to go into Iraq. Both of those things are problematic. Both of those things are heavy.
As you say, whichever way you come at this, and wherever you are in terms of understanding what is going on, and I think Tucker Carlson's series is good, as much as some people criticize it for not going far enough. It is making this point very clearly that sort of all of this matters, and so on, wherever you stand on the issues that we've been talking about. And it is absolutely relevant to where we are today, because it has taken us, through Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen, and of course, in the game, to emphasize the point, Iran, there's going to be a starting up again of direct action to overthrow the Iranian government. So all of these wars, which were essentially instigated at the point of 9/11, are highly relevant and still real to the world that we're in today. And we still are on the precipice in a way of global conflict. Russia, obviously, also Iran. If there is a serious attempt on Iran, who knows where that's going to play out? And in the context of all in the context of a genocide against Palestinians. So we really are in a period where understanding how we got to where we are now, and in the sense of making political decisions about what side we're on and so on. We have to understand how we got here, and I think understanding the events surrounding 9/11 and whatever combination of foul play or incompetence you want to go with, but understanding that is critical to inform how we deal with where we are now. And I guess the warning in all of this is that we know a lot now about what happened on 9/11. So we are talking about people who are belligerent in the extreme. We're now in the situation we're in now, where the belligerence is still there. These forces behind 9/11 are still there today, pushing us towards war, whether it's with Russia or with Iran. So this is more relevant than ever. Not just a historical event to understand.
Do we know who were making bets on the airplanes? They were hiding that in the 9/11 report. Like, they didn't want to disclose that. But do we know who those people were, or those organizations?
The 9/11 Commission knows who those individuals are, and said that it wasn't worthy of any further investigation because these individuals could not possibly be connected with Al Qaeda. Which just begs the question, well, okay, but they still know the attacks are about to happen, and if they're not connected with Al Qaeda, maybe Al Qaeda is not responsible for the attacks. So, this will be one of the things which, obviously, Tucker Carlson's series is supposed to be there to try and make the case for a new investigation. And, the International Center for 9/11 Justice, we with a number of other organizations, had a big event in Washington, D.C. Around the anniversary. And we had Senator Ron Johnson there, for example. Former Representative Kurt Weldon was there. Dennis Kucinich was there. And the general sort of drive is that there needs to be some form of new investigation into 9/11, and making the case that that's where we need to go. And one of the things for sure is to look into the informed trading, the put options in the run-up.
Yes.
Who knew? As well as a multitude of other issues which that they have sought to bury and obfuscate. And again, you talked about the 9/11 Commission. I think Tucker's second episode does do a reasonably good job of showing to the American public and the global public how fraudulent the 9/11 Commission report was. It was Philip Zelikow who was the guy who was really kept control over the writing of that report. And this is a chap who was connected to the Bush administration. He was not independent. He had conflicts of interest. And if you read the 9/11 Commission report, as somebody who's familiar with the construction of public myths, which as a historian, Philip Zelikow certainly is, you have a report which doesn't really read like a rigorous sort of scientific analysis or report. It reads like narrative construction, and it's all pointed towards painting this picture of this Al Qaeda network and so on, connection with the rogue states and so on. So it was narrative construction that the 9/11 Commission was mainly about, with Zelikow at the head of it. But that's not a proper investigation. That's not getting to the truth of what happened on 9/11.
And to make it even worse, then you get one president after the next. Meaning, take up the 9/11 part out for a moment. Everybody understood that George Bush led the country into a war. That immediately after this, Bush was like, we need to connect this to Saddam Hussein. Figure out a way to do it. Like, almost instantly. No, there was no forethought. There was anything. There was no analysis. We need to connect this to Saddam Hussein. And effectively crafting this in any way he wanted to craft it to come up with a justification for war. Obama gets in office. Nancy Pelosi, who knows at this point. Nancy Pelosi is giving interviews where she said, I knew he was lying. And when you bring up this notion of impeachment, she's like, yeah, we thought it'd be a distraction. They impeached Trump twice. It's like, yeah, we think that'll be a distraction. The fact that the president lied the country into a war where a million Iraqis, if not more, were killed, create the pretext for us to go into multiple countries with Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, etc., spending $10 trillion to do it. And then the political space was like, yeah, we don't want to touch this. Do you think that at some point this will get touched, that this will get relitigated, reinvestigated, or do you think we're pissing in the wind on this?
I certainly don't think that we're pissing in the wind on this. I think there are two ways I respond to this question when it's given to me. Is that, you know, it might be that we don't get the kind of accountability that we ideally would have, where we have people who are prosecuted and so on. You know, Tony Blair's put on a war crimes trial, etc. Now, I think we should aim for that, and I do think that we're in a state of political change at the moment and flux, where actually there is an opportunity that, you know, if enough people realize how corrupt, as it were, the system has been, that the uniparty, as you were implying just then, that you know, maybe there will be ultimately the political will, as we try to have some kind of reorganization of our political structures for proper formal accountability and so on. So I think that's what we should be pushing for, and that's what we should be aiming for. But even if we fall short of achieving that, what I do think, and what I am very confident of, is that, you know, and we're already seeing these changes in the last couple of years. More and more people are waking up to the issues surrounding 9/11, just as more and more people have woken up to the issues surrounding the JFK assassination. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think that sort of we will reach a point where most people, and globally, I'm sure the public opinion polls show a much higher proportion of the public are aware that 9/11 was a false flag,
inside job,
etc. But within the West, I think you will find that increasingly people will be adding together JFK, 9/11, and all these smaller level things like the Syria chemical weapons or the Iraq case, the WMD. This is building up a stock of knowledge in the mind of a lot of people in the West, and they realize that, yeah, you know, our government's been lying, and they've been lying on very major issues, especially when it comes to these wars, which we've been dragged into time and time again. And so I think we'll reach that point where most people will know and understand, and we won't have a false historical memory where everyone just believes the official story on 9/11. And I think we'll get there, and there are signs we are getting there. And in a way, Tucker Carlson's series is an indicator of that opening up. However limited and however carefully he is treading into these controversial areas, you know, he's a very influential broadcaster, obviously, and certainly the International Center for 9/11 Justice. I mean, our feeling is, you know, Jimmy Dore, for example, Jimmy Dore has been talking about these issues for a long time now. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it is opening up, it is widening, and, you know, in the academic sort of realm, I mean, I know a lot of colleagues now, both in and out of the system, who know full well what happened on 9/11. So I think we'll get there.
Yeah, I mean,
ideally, it would end in a full inquiry, you know, criminal convictions and so on. But if we don't get to that point, we will at least have most people knowing what really happened, and that will matter at the end of the day. It will matter because it will inform how people react to their governments. It will mean that people are less likely to be fooled again, and so on. Again, you know, they might be considering various sort of techniques to get us to war with Russia. I think the European Union's going with the drone allegation, the Russian Federation, that the Russians are flying all these drones around Europe and so on. You know, publics, I think, you know, are not going to fall for these things in a way that they have done in the past, and that's because more people are, I think, are waking up to these issues, these structural deep events, as I called them in a paper I wrote with Kevin Ryan a year or so ago.
I mean, this destroys the government, right? I mean, it has to. I mean, what I mean by that is kind of like, and I think that's part of the hurdle that I think people have with this. It's again, I'm going to use UFO reference. If you ask people, do they believe in UFOs or those type of things? Many people would say yes. They believe that there's something else out there. But for people who are in the field, there's always this gap between, yeah, I think of this, but I don't think of this like a value of a dollar. Like the value of a dollar, there's, even though it's subjective, you feel it. There's a weight to it. It's almost like you understand it, almost like lungs to air. This is kind of very similar in this way, where to believe that a government will go this far, murder 4,000 of its people, in pursuit of murdering millions others, that's a big pill. Oh, that's a horse pill. And not just a horse pill, any notion of credibility from the government from that point on. Because it's not just the people who did it, it's the people who covered it up also, meaning the next administration and the administration after that. And I guess the further you get away from it in regards to the administration, they have less culpability. But the Obama administration, oh, they are entirely culpable, meaning they just wanted to sweep this under the rug and move on. They didn't care about the reality of this, the complications of this, any kind of difficulties associated with punishment of the commander-in-chief that was at the helm when all of this was taking place. It destroys all credibility in the political system going forward. I mean, I know you say like it makes people doubtful of any of the tricks that the government is doing. It makes people doubtful, period. Not about tricks. Meaning the government could come after that and be completely honest, and nobody will believe anything that the government was saying. I'll give you another example. Richard Dolan. Richard Dolan did this interview once where he came out, he says, you know, even if the government came out and says, we're coming clean on this topic, whatever the topic is, how many people will believe the government when it says it? And again, this goes to the JFK thing, the weapons of mass destruction stuff. There is a level of skepticism that is built into the way that we look at our government these days that wasn't there in the 70s, wasn't there in the 80s. I don't even know if it was there in the 90s, but it's there now. And I think the polling that you point out is showing that more and more people are considering maybe the government did do it. It's indicative of that. I don't know how government keeps together under that level of, I guess, skepticism about anything that the government does.
I think you're right. One of the implications, and this is what I felt at the time, because when I realized that there was a big issue with 9/11, I was already a critical scholar, and I was, teaching Herman Chomsky's propaganda model, and I knew that the system was not functioning correctly, no doubt about it, and we had to try and sort of correct the media and how it was operating. When the facts sunk in regarding 9/11, it was just a recognition. Okay, we're not just talking about a dysfunctional system. We're talking about a system which is broken. That our democracy, or what we perceive to be our democratic system, is simply not functioning in any way. It is broken, and the implications of that are intimidating, because you realize, well, actually, this is going to have to be changed, and this is going to be a really big task to change a system which is this broken, where these things can be occurring, such as 9/11 or the assassination of Kennedy, or possibly with Kirk as well, Charlie Kirk, who just had. And that is a demand upon us as citizens, that actually we can't just turn a blind eye, that we have to confront the reality that we need to engage in probably generational political change. It doesn't have to be sort of, I'm not talking about violent revolution. I'm talking about people, recognizing the system's broken and then taking the steps, however that might form in the coming years, whether it's through new political movements or parties. We don't know how it will evolve. It will require energy and effort from populations in the West to deal with our political class, who, as you say, varying degrees of culpability. The further away from 9/11, the less, and so on. But I think people recognize that there's a level of corruption in our political establishments across Europe and America, which is severe. Whether you look at the Epstein business and the trafficking issues surrounding that, or we look at the wars and the lies, whether you look at Russiagate, the system is very broken and it's very corrupted, and we have to, and it's going to have to be us, the people, who push the politicians to do it, because people who get into those positions of power, they are to varying degrees co-opted or corrupted. I think that's certainly my experience of my interaction with politicians over the years. And they're going to need to be pushed by popular will, by people, activism. At the moment, this danger of war with Russia, that can be blocked if enough people get. streets and protest, and that will have an effect and so on. But it requires people to get busy and so on. So this is a huge effort, a huge task we have ahead of us. But that's the bottom line. If these things are going on, it does mean the system's broken, and it does mean that we've got a lot of changes which we're going to have to push through one way or another, unless we're just going to give up entirely and just allow these things to keep on happening, which of course I don't think is an alternative. You said that how could it be that a deep state would harm America's own civilians? But politicians, the Tony Blairs and the George Bushes, when they make decisions to go to war in Iraq, they know full well that several thousand young American women and men and women will die.
They're going to die,
as well as all civilians. They're making those kind of calculations all the time. They probably see it as sacrifice. They probably see a sacrifice of American lives for the pursuit of American interests, and also some of that also includes false flags as well. These are sacrifices necessary for whatever vision they have. So it's a big problem we've got, and I think you're right. That's why people don't want to go there, because it is, in a sense, not quite the sum of all fears. But Frances Shaw, who works with us at IC91, and she's a psychologist, and she wrote a very good podcast about how coming to terms with these kind of deep state crimes, or state crimes against democracy, as Lawrence Verhaven described them, it's very similar to when you have child abuse within a family. Okay, and what tends to happen when you have a child abuse going on in the family is that the siblings and one of the parents, normally the mother, simply block it out, and they don't want to acknowledge that this is going on. So it's basically sort of pushed out to the margins. And Francis argues that it's a very similar relationship between populations and the government as it is between children and the father in a family. The father is there to protect the family. The state is there supposedly to protect us. And realizing that actually maybe it's not. Maybe it's actually harming us very directly is a really difficult thing to get over, psychological bump. But people in abusive families do get over that bump and are able to realize what's going on and come to terms and then deal with the abuse which is occurring. And it's the same with understanding these kind of crimes. This is recognizing that what we thought was there to look after us might not be looking after us.
Piers, fantastic breakdown, man. Thank you for this. And if nothing else, I mean, if Tucker can get somebody like me to pay attention to it, then I would imagine there are going to be a lot of people who are paying attention to it. They're going to come to different assessments and watching those series. I mean, I think he's on number 3. I watched the 3rd one today, and the 4th one, I guess, is going to come on next week. Thank you for this. Deeply appreciate it. It's 5 total.
It's good to talk to you. Sorry?
Oh, I was asking, it's 5 total. He has 2 more left.
Yeah, he has two more. It's 5 in total. And, Journal of 9/11 Studies, we've got a lot of articles. I mean, they're more academically inclined, but on the 9/11 issue, there's a lot of material out there on the web, which people can go to in order to understand better, the arguments and the debates over what really happened on 9/11.
I'll put it below the video. If you send me the link to it, I'll put it below the video so people can read it for themselves, just to get a wider context on the conversations that's taking place around it. Because I gotta be honest, this is illuminating, and not necessarily in the best way. It's kind of like a black light. It's very dark. Piers Robinson, thank you for this. Piers Robinson, he's co-director of Organization for Propaganda Studies. You can follow him on Twitter at Piers Robinson, and the other organizations that you're associated with, I need to write those down. Please give the audience a heads up where they are.
Yeah, International Center for 9/11 Justice, IC911.org on Twitter, and also obviously with its own website, and the Journal of 9/11 Studies, which is linked to IC911, that's on that website as well. So that's a good place to go for all things related to 9/11.
I'll put it below the video. Piers, you have a fantastic rest of your day, man. Thank you for this.
Okay, good to talk with you.
Bye-bye. All right, that is a good breakdown. That is terrifying. Here's the thing. When you are looking at October 7th, and you see Israeli soldiers coming out saying they got stand-down orders, it puts you in a different headspace. Just puts you in a very different headspace. I'm going to go to my guests. We are joined, the man, the legend, Caleb Maupin. How you doing, Caleb? You doing okay this morning?
I'm good. Yeah, it's a little bit rainy here in New York, but bit of a groggy day, but overall pretty nice. Glad to be here. How you been?
I'm doing okay. For some reason, I didn't think you were in New York. For some reason, I thought you were somewhere else. But
Nope, I'm New
either
York
way-
City, just like I've been here for, it's been a while. 15 years now, I think I've lived in this city. Imagine
you?
that.
So
Yeah,
where were you originally from?
Ohio. I grew up in a really small town called Orville. It's where they make Smucker's jelly. Then I moved to Cleveland. I was in Cleveland for a few years. And then I thought I was coming to New York City for a month, just for a month. And I never went back.
You're just saying.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, I came on a Greyhound bus for a month, and then I went back and got all my stuff, and I've been here ever since. So
And
pretty
stayed.
wild.
Just for the audience, Caleb Maupin, he's speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst. He's author of several books. His most recent, Neo-Trotsky. What is it? What's the name of that book?
Trotsky and the neoconservatives, the whole story. Yeah.
Thank you. And also, you can find Caleb on, I lost my place, exam is all right, change your political. Center for Political Innovation.
Yeah.
That is the organization that Caleb is associated with. Definitely check them out. They have events very often. I mean, you guys are very active as an organization. So
Yep.
definitely check Caleb out. Caleb, I want to start with, I guess, let's start with the Tomahawk missiles. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this. I seem to be the only channel that's very skeptical of this. I see it as a bluff for leverage. There was a report that came on the Telegraph today that pointed out that even if Ukraine got the missiles, they wouldn't have the capability of firing them. And it's unclear when they could even get them, even if Trump allowed them to get them. So for me, this is not an issue until it's an issue. And right now, this comes across more as a craft for leverage. This, however, is Trump. He was asked about the Tomahawks, and this is his response. I want to get your take on it. If we can flip this over, there we are.
Or sell them to NATO and let them sell them to Ukraine.
Yeah, I've sort of made a decision pretty much. If you consider, yeah, I think I want to find out what they're doing with them. You know, where are they sending them? I guess I'd have to ask that question. That war should never have started.
What a bizarre answer. I need to figure out where they're sending them. Well, obviously, dude, you're sending them to Ukraine. Like, that answer makes no sense to me. Yeah, I think I made a decision, but I need to figure out where they're going to send them. Do you think that they're sending Tomahawks to sit in London or to sit in Berlin? You're sending them to Ukraine, and you, President of the United States, would have to give the order to fire those missiles because Ukraine doesn't have the capability of doing so. Give me your take on this. Do you think this is a real issue? Do you think this is more of a bluff, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I listened to what Russia's saying, and I'm kind of blown away by how Russia's just kind of calling Trump's bluff. Every time he does something like this, they're just like, nah, no, the negotiations are going well as far as we're concerned. Just don't acknowledge, don't be concerned about this. I mean, it would be great to see this war in Ukraine brought to an end. I am certainly disappointed by the Trump administration. Beyond they did worse than I thought. Let me just put it that way. I mean, I'm yet to see really any improvements. That said, I mean, is it possible this war in Ukraine could end? Sure. And that would be great. And they did run on a platform of at least, they said they would end it, and it would have been bad if the American people voted against that. But yeah, I'm not thrilled with the Trump administration, but if they actually end this war in Ukraine, that would be great. I thought it was interesting that we saw a member of Congress yesterday come out and just kind of drop a bombshell on a podcast about how Zelensky is sending $50 million every month to Saudi Arabia to a bank account. That's interesting.
Yes.
That's a bit of information that, that's our tax money too, as American citizens, right? It's just getting, thrown in a bank account. And more stuff is coming out. They declassified some information about the corruption About how this, I mean, we all know that Joe Biden's son has no experience in the energy industry, but as soon as the Ukrainian government was toppled in 2014, Hunter Biden got a job on the board of directors of Burisma Holdings, a natural gas company, where he was making quite a bit of money. And then there was a prosecutor in Ukraine who was looking into that, possibly as an example of corruption. And Biden brags, he got him fired. He got him fired, And now the latest is we have some more declassified information from the CIA. They've released, some information about how Biden was going out of his way to make sure that no one investigated this prosecutor who gave his son a good gig. And that's interesting. And James Comey is indicted, for pushing the Russiagate hoax. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard has revealed that Russiagate was a hoax. That's a good thing. But does this translate into actual action? That would be nice. Now, the other thing that I noticed is, Trump should be giving Nicolas Maduro a medal because he saved the lives of American diplomats in Venezuela. Did you see that? Right?
I did see that, but I did see that. Correct. Give me your take.
They were going to blow up the embassy. The U.S. embassy in Venezuela was going to get blown up, and they caught the people that were planning to do it and arrested them, and they stopped it. So, Nicolas Maduro should get a medal for saving the lives of American diplomats, and that goes to show you how crooked the Miami mafia really is, right? They really are hoping to provoke an all-out war with Venezuela, and they've been engaging in all these provocations, violating the airspace, sinking the ships, all this kind of stuff. They were going to blow up the embassy as a false flag, and Nicolas Maduro stopped it and revealed it. So I'm waiting for Trump to give Maduro a medal for saving the day. Obviously, he's not doing that. Though it is interesting, I hear Maduro's statements. He doesn't call out Trump. He calls out Marco Rubio. And he appeals to Trump, and after the attempted assassination in Butler, Maduro said, the people who are trying to kill Trump are the same people that killed Kennedy, the same people that are trying to kill me. And so, and he talks about the Miami mafia, right? He talks about, Marco Rubio and his ties to drug cartels. So that leads me to understand that there are divisions within the Trump administration, which has been my perception from the beginning, right? That it's not unilateral. It's not just one entity, right? That there are other factions, and that Tulsi Gabbard and her forces have another agenda. Then you have the Marco Rubios, and there's a lot of different things going on. But that said, let's end this war in Ukraine already. Let's just move ahead and end this war in Ukraine. Why are we threatening and cooperating with this all-out effort? I mean, it reminds me of the last time Trump was in office. They're just trying to do anything they can to possibly provoke a war with Venezuela. But Venezuela is not going to take the bait. Russia and China have Venezuela's back. Iran has Venezuela's back. Venezuela is locked and solid. They're not going anywhere. So back off, just get those ships out of there and let's move on, please.
Well, I guess there are two things with that. One, Donald Trump is not going to give a congratulation to something that Donald Trump might have been involved in.
Yeah.
Meaning, if you're looking for more provocation, right? If you're looking for a reason to strike Venezuela, be like, oh my God, they blew up the embassy. So, Maduro is obviously outing this because he wants to make it very clear. We have nothing to do with this. This is not something we're going to allow. We're not giving you any pretext by which to hit us. So there's that part. The second part, why do you think there are divisions in Trump's administration? I get the sense that Donald Trump has always wanted to get rid of Maduro, and that this is the pressure campaign that he effectively has been engaged in. The first time around in his first administration, he was handicapped by the whole Trump and Russia stuff. This time around, he is not handicapped by that. As you point out, they've pushed that down pretty significantly, and there is no political opposition. So Trump can do whatever Trump wants to do in that office. Republicans are going to back him on it. Doesn't really matter what it is, short of making a deal with the Russians, right? But I get the sense that Rubio, Trump are one-to-one on this. They're on the same page.
Well, there's a lot of information that would tell another story. Now, for example, in Trump's first term, he really wanted to have a meeting with Nicolas Maduro. And at the United Nations, when Maduro was at the United Nations, when Trump was, speaking at the United Nations in his first term, there was supposed to be a meeting, and Mike Pompeo ruined it. And that's, Anya Parampil revealed that. And also, another bit of information is that John Bolton has said numerous times, he's told the story of how the reason the USA stopped pushing, regime change in Venezuela and just kind of pivoted away from it in the first term was because Donald Trump said he was bored of it. And at the meeting of his cabinet, he just basically said to John Bolton and other people in his first term, I'm really bored of Venezuela. Can we start talking about something else? And John Bolton, who is now anti-Trump, has had his home raided by the FBI. He blames Trump for that. Oh my goodness, how could he move on from war in Venezuela? And that in his first term, Trump had some kind of desire to reconcile with Venezuela. Mike Pompeo moved against it. He had, it was the three guys working his anti-Venezuela policy were John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, and Elliot Abrams. And then, they got bored. Trump said, look, I'm bored of this. I just don't want to do it anymore. And that's how they pivoted away from it. And you remember that whole thing with the food truck. They had the food truck from Colombia, and then they lit their own food truck on fire. And it was the whole thing. And then Trump was just kind of like, I'm bored of this. I just don't want to do it. And that's what got the neocons quite upset with Trump. And that's ultimately one of the factors in John Bolton's departure from the administration. So I think it is more complicated than that. But we'll see.
Okay, I understand that. I can only go by what I see. And so all of that may be true. And I don't doubt what you're saying. But right now, Donald Trump is murdering Venezuelans that are in boats. This is like the third or fourth time that he's effectively murdered people in the boats. He has given a speech where in the middle of this kind of deranged speech, he points out, we've murdered so many people in boats that nobody wants to come out, even to go fishing. And so we need to start looking inwards, basically inland, on people to murder. That's the stuff that he's saying.
Yeah.
There's been cargo ships that have apparently landed in Puerto Rico, seemingly bringing in materials for some sort of strike on Venezuela. This doesn't seem like there's any kind of, disambiguation or this kind of distinction between Rubio and Trump on this. He seems held set on, we need Venezuela. And by the way, there may be other political issues driving this. Like if you want to take Russian oil off the market, for example, well, you may need more oil. Now, this doesn't entirely make sense because it would take like a decade to exploit the reserves that are in Venezuela for the benefit of the United States in the way that he may want it. But I don't know, there may be other things that are pushing this. The impact of China that's in South America, meaning that huge port that's in Peru, China has gained far more leverage in South America than what it was during the first term that Donald Trump was in. Meaning he may be looking at this stuff in a different way where he considers Venezuela to be part of national security in the way that that deranged military woman was talking, saying that the minerals and the resources that are on the ground in South America belongs effectively to the United States. I don't know, Caleb. I'm not seeing Trump pulling away on this. It seems like they are, not to mention the New York Times report that they were talking to political opposition, the same political opposition that may have been involved in the whole embassy thing in the first place. Meaning it seems like they're doing everything in their power to put pressure on that government, to get that government to either implode, to get somebody to whack Maduro, or potentially even military strikes if they can't find an easier way to get rid of Maduro. And one last point. Apparently, Trump has cut diplomatic ties with Venezuela because he got pissed off that he told Maduro to leave. Maduro said, I'm not going anywhere, in which case Trump blew a gasket and is now trying to effectively overthrow the government. But correct me if I'm wrong on any of that.
No, I mean, all of that is happening, and but I don't see it going anyplace. I mean, I think, again, if they were going to move in and actually strike, they probably would have done it already. And that Venezuela has signed its partnership, it's enhanced its military ties with Russia. And look, I mean, if Venezuela was going to fall, they would have fallen in 2016, 2017, around then, when things were very, very bad. Things have really improved over the last couple of years in Venezuela. They were in that very serious, kind of food crisis, mode. But that's in the past. That's over. And so now they've solidified power. The economy is getting better. They've got ties with Iran. They're producing their own food in a way that they were not before. And so I think that Venezuela is much safer than they were before. There have been so many attempted coups and so many examples of like somebody in the military trying to move against him and it just doesn't work. So yeah, I think that Venezuela is safe for now. But it would be great if these threats would end and these provocations would end. And I think they are scraping the barrel, coming up with anything they could possibly figure out to try and provoke a situation like this latest embassy thing, but it just didn't work out. So I hope that what happened in Trump's first term happens again, where Trump just says, can we just move on? I'm bored of this. We'll see.
So you think that they're effectively trying to provoke Maduro, in which case then they can respond to the provocation, but they don't necessarily want to make the move entirely and purely on their own?
They need more than just their word, right? And that's what seems to be wild about this. It seems like they just can't go in on the basis of, we want to go in, we don't like Maduro. If they could do that, they would have already done that, right? They kind of need something else. The other thing is that Venezuela is getting a lot of support they wouldn't get unless Trump was in the White House, and that's one of the ironic aspects of this, right? You have the government of Colombia.
Explain that.
Yeah, you have all kinds of governments throughout the region, Chile, Colombia, and all of that. If a Democrat was in the White House and threatening Maduro, they would go along with it. Because it's Trump, and because Trump is so hated and all of that, they're actually saying they would support Venezuela. They're opposed to this. You got European countries that are also making similar statements. And, Maduro's getting a lot more support simply because it's Donald Trump is the guy threatening him. When Obama was threatening Venezuela, he got a lot of support from European countries, from, so-called leftists in Latin America and other places. But now, because it's Trump and he's so hateable, Venezuela has a lot more support.
Now, apparently, Maduro signed the security pact on Putin's birthday. Intentionally, right? It just waited for the birthday to sign the security pact. But Russia, Iran, China, those countries are so far away. What could they actually do if the U.S. did attack? Meaning they're not involved in preventing those boats from being murdered, or those people on those boats from being murdered. I mean, do you think that really has any kind of impact on, let's say, facts on the ground?
Oh, I think it does have an impact. First of all, you got the Wagner group. You got, Russian military kind of, people, not direct military, but military contractors that are very important. You also, China has a naval fleet. I mean, I think China has sent, ships to Venezuela in the past, and, China has military apparatus there. In addition to that, Venezuela, they tend to, get a lot of support, and they sell oil on the international markets, and they are pretty well connected. I mean, Iran and Venezuela are quite close. When I was in Venezuela, that's one thing I noticed was that this was maybe 10 years ago. I just noticed how much, you would go into buildings and you'd see pictures of the Iranian supreme leader, and, they would reference Iran. There was Iranian products and stuff. And that was 10 years ago. Now their relationship with Iran is way closer and way stronger. So, I think, we got to deal with that as well. So, yeah, I think that Venezuela is prepared to defend itself pretty solidly, and that Trump is looking for a pretext. In order to do something, there would need to be a full-on provocation or pretext, and they seem to have prevented that from being the case. And that said, things could pivot in a different direction. But overall, I feel like Venezuela has protected itself. They are being harassed. Trump has, and this is an interesting aspect of Trump, right? You remember January 6th, there were all these foreign constituencies at the January 6th rally. One of, there are buses and buses of Miami Cubans. There were buses of Shah supporters, people that admire the Shah from California, buses of Likudniks from Israel. And it's like all these like foreign constituencies that have like their own like little bone to pick. And they're not working in the overall interest of imperialism. They've got their short-term vendetta against their own government, kind of. And that Trump panders hard to groups like that. And those kind of groups, they don't really care about, how well the global system goes and how to negotiate and be strategic. They just want to overthrow the government that they fled from. And that's a lot of constituencies in America that we have, the people that have lost the revolution in various countries, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, wherever you go, the people that were on the other side of the revolution, China, wherever, they come to America and they want to go home and kill the commies or whatever, kill the radicals, and they don't really care. And Trump has really sucked up to those folks as part of his coalition. So he has to please them. And that, when there's all this talk of the Miami Mafia, it's talking about the Miami Cubans, right? It's talking about a group of people. I mean, people don't know the details. Luis Posada Carriles, I think he died, but this is a guy who blew up an airline in Cuba, right? Killed a whole bunch of school children on an airline, committed a huge, horrendous act of terrorism, and the U.S. government held him and let him stay in Miami for years after committing a horrendous crime of terrorism, blowing up an airline and killing innocent school children and travelers in Cuba. And the U.S. government held him. And there's the whole case for a while. There was the Cuban Five. There were 5 Cuban kind of intelligence officers that were there investigating these terrorism networks that would go to Cuba and bomb hotels and stuff. And the U.S. government arrested them and held them. And the U.S. government was pointing the Cubans pointed to the U.S. government. They said, look, this is where these illegal criminal organizations based in Miami are. And with that information, the U.S. government arrested these 5 Cuban guys and held them. Now they've gone home. They've been returned. But for many years, that was an important cause, the Cuban Five. These 5 Cuban guys who were investigating terrorist and organized crime apparatus in Miami, who the U.S. government detained and held in prison.
Jesus. Wow. That's a hell of a constituency that you effectively have to resolve. Okay, fair enough. From your mouth to God's ears, it just seems like he's very insistent, and it seems like he's trying to put pressure so military strikes wouldn't have to take place. Like, I want to be able to put pressure on the government to see if I can get without having to actually throw a punch in this. Yeah. But the willingness to throw a punch seems to be there, especially with that embassy issue. Yeah. Meaning the fact that the embassy thing took place shows or gives some kind of indication that they are looking for something kinetic to kick this off. Yep. So I hope you're right. I hope the government is solid. I hope the government doesn't collapse. I hope that it
reminds you of Havana syndrome. You remember Havana syndrome?
Yeah.
Right. So as soon as the USA opened an embassy in Cuba, there was all this stuff about, they had sound weapons, and the whole thing was very, very bizarre. And then you wonder now that there's been a plot exposed, they were going to blow up an embassy. That raises questions. What was going on with the Havana syndrome, right? Was this, and again, it seems like this Miami mafia is not totally under the control of the American government, right? And they don't want relations with Cuba. They don't want relations with Venezuela. And, maybe, what they were planning to blow up the embassy in Venezuela. And maybe they were the ones that were, making all these American diplomats sick or whatever they were doing. It was the Havana syndrome was a very strange case, right? Because Cuba wanted and worked very, very hard to establish U.S. relations. And the people that were being targeted were American diplomats who were, U.S., CIA people, basically. I mean, U.S. State Department people. So why Cuba's not targeting them? So who was, right? And it makes you think that there are these networks of kind of organized crime, intelligence kind of forces that, that are not, necessarily in line with the overall agenda of the American state, that want to ruin relations and want to provoke military action against Cuba and against Venezuela. Another big thing about Trump's Venezuela narrative, according to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency, what country in that region in South America, Latin America, what country has the best drug policies? Cuba. Cuba has the most effective anti-drug policies. There is no drug problem in Cuba. So Venezuela is aligned with Cuba. And the military of Venezuela is trained in Cuba. Cuba has soldiers in Venezuela. Cuba has a network of healthcare clinics and doctors and stuff. So Cuba is very, very close to Venezuela, so much so that a common talking point among the Rocco Rubio crowd is to say, Venezuela is now a colony of Cuba. Well, if that's the case, they're definitely not run by drug cartels. The whole drug cartel thing is a joke. I mean, yeah, there's some presence of drug organizations in Venezuela. It's a problem, but Venezuela is inconsequential in the international drug trade compared to a lot of countries in that region. Ecuador is increasingly becoming a serious country with a problem in terms of the drug trade. But Venezuela, I mean, they're there. I mean, it exists, but it's not dominant in the way that it is. And they're using that as a pretext, and it's just a fiction. According to their own publications, DEA publications, the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, everyone looks into it. Venezuela is not the center of any drug problem, right? They're just it's just something they are using as an excuse.
Yeah, it's just wild. That's all. It's amazing how a president can just say, "Yeah, they have drugs, so we're going in," and that's all you require. There's nothing else. There's no law that kicks in. There's no legislative branch that says, "Hey, The president is murdering people off the coast. What's going on with this? It's just raw presidential power that's naked, which is why I don't even know why he requires a fig leaf to do it. Meaning, like, I get your point. He's looking for something else beyond his own word in order to do this.
I mean, there's an element with the Trump administration of conservatainment has kind of taken over policy, where it's like they're not as concerned about what they actually do. They're concerned about how this plays on Fox News and like fulfilling a narrative, right?
Fox
Because
what's
Fox,
that? You think Fox would care if Donald Trump invaded Venezuela, if he did airstrikes on Venezuela and just said, well, there are drugs in Venezuela, and he gets some rando person lawyer to come up with some kind of legal justification for it? You really think Fox would care?
They would love that. They would love that. If he, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, you know, and it's like Venezuela is not really a drug country, but it's like, I'm telling you, conservatainment has kind of taken over, right? So, you know, and you listen to Fox, you listen to, you know, the conservative, you know, entertainment or whatever. All the woke people, they're all communists. Now, I don't know how that works, right? You know, but all the woke people are just the same as China, which they're not, right? And they're all a bunch of drug-using lowlives and all of this. So it's like Venezuela is a Marxist country, so they must be drug-using hippies, you know, that are protesting on our campuses and cheering for the death of Charlie Kirk. And so, of course, Venezuela does drugs because a bunch of college Marxists, they all use drugs. And that, you know, and it's like Trump is like fighting a war against the left in the mind of Fox News viewers, and somehow the left is the same as anti-imperialist governments around the world, and they're all using drugs. And and also the other thing is that there's this Reagan worship, this Reagan nostalgia. And, you know, Reagan did use drugs as a justification for a lot of his policies, even though he was arming the Contras that were heavily involved in the drug trade. And, you know, in Colombia, the USA increased its military activities in Colombia, even though the paramilitaries the USA was backing were also heavily involved in the drug trade. But that's a Reagan era talking point, right? Is all the drugs, we got to go in there. And then eventually George Herbert Walker Bush invaded Panama on the pretext of drugs, right? And so it's like we're like reenacting Reagan era policies because on Fox News they eulogize and worship Ronald Reagan, and they want to put his face on the dime and all of this. And yeah, to some degree or other, it's just they're not even really concerned about what really happens. They're concerned about how this like really looks nice and cool on Fox News, and how Fox News viewers can feel, you know, that this is great or something. I mean, it's a very, very strange time we live in.
But that's all of our politics now. I mean, yeah, I'm agreeing with you, right? This is kind of Chicago is a mess, so we need to send military into Chicago, and we need to send them into Oregon or whatever else. I don't know. We need to. I mean, you can go down kind of the list on items where these guys are effectively using whatever they want to come up with as a justification to do whatever they want to come up with. The other thing I wanted to hit with you is Israel. So Donald Trump, of course, put out his 20-point peace plan. And in putting that 20-point peace plan out, him and Netanyahu had kind of bumped heads together, basically saying, hey, what do we agree with? And they made a plan that is in Israel's interest. The entire plan is effectively given from Israel's perspective. All right. There were multiple accounts of Hamas's point of view. In some cases, people were saying that there were elements of Hamas that didn't agree on it, other elements that did, in which case there was a disagreement on the plan coming from the Hamas perspective. Recently, however, Hamas has said, look, there are things in this plan that we need to discuss and negotiate. And so apparently there are negotiations that are taking place now. And this is per Sputnik that several countries are kind of putting their heads together. Egypt, Qatar, Turkish, Israeli, and the US are all negotiating over the plan itself. Now, part of the issue with the plan, and there are many, has to do with this idea of, well, wait a minute. Netanyahu came out immediately and said there will be no state, and Trump agrees with me on that. So there's that. B, there's so many holes in the plan. There's this question of whether Trump will get involved, if indeed, which Israel will do, violate the plan. And people like me who look at this say, well, dude, they violated every other plan that they've come up with. Why wouldn't they violate this? And in every case, either administration, whether it was the Joe Biden administration or the Trump administration, Donald Trump turned a blind eye, and Witkoff would turn around and blame Hamas, regardless of whether Hamas has been begging to end this war. And it's been Israel over and over and over again. Even Matt Miller, that degenerate that was in the Biden administration, pointed out how any deal that came up with Netanyahu effectively would scuttle. Recently, Donald Trump was asked, hey, if Israel violated the deal, or effectively, how would you stop Israel from violating the deal? Listen to his answer, because I think his answer gives context to the point of view that I take on this.
Possible to make sure everybody adheres to the deal. The primary guarantee is once this deal happens, if it does happen, look, they're in negotiations right now. We are going to do everything possible. We have a lot of power, and we're going to do everything possible to make sure everybody adheres to the deal. Okay?
Caleb, that means nothing.
Yes.
Coming from Donald Trump, that means absolutely, that is worth spit in a jar.
Right.
Like, that is nothing. But Hamas seems to be legitimately considering it. And what they're fighting over, or what they're negotiating over, is, well, this plan says nothing about where Israeli troops are going to be, because they're still maintaining themselves in Gaza. And so you could still have a situation where, according to Netanyahu, well, our troops aren't moving, or the troops effectively just stay. And yet there's still this expectation that Hamas implements the deal. This is one of the things that the Hamas is negotiating over their own drop site, breaking this down. Give me a take on this. And why is Hamas considering this deal, considering they know, they have to know, that any provocation by Israel, the U.S. is going to turn a blind eye?
Well, my understanding of the deal is that Gaza would not go under the direct control of Israel. They would create another body that would rule Gaza, but Hamas would be militarily, kind of uprooted, right?
Tony Blair.
Yeah, and
Blair.
that's kind of the proposal, is that there would be, another body that would run Gaza. Hamas would be militarily uprooted, and then there's supposed to be a road to statehood in it, but then Netanyahu said that's not actually the case. And I don't know. I mean, again, it looks like a bad deal for the Palestinians, but at the same time, I mean, they're in a very bad situation, and I mean, they need the killing to stop. And
yes.
I mean, it's not a good situation at all for the Palestinians, but it is a situation where, in theory, Israel could be forced to stop the killing. Gaza would not be directly under Israel's control. There would be other entities involved. I mean, I don't know. It's all, I mean, do you remember when Hamas got elected? Do you remember when they yes. Israel was, basically the whole international community demanded that the Palestinians have an election. And so they elected Hamas. And then ever since then, it's been like, oh no, they can't do that. They elected terrorists and all. Like, that was the Bush thing, right? We're bringing democracy, right? Democracy, we need democracy. The people in Gaza voted for Hamas to be their government. And ever since then, there has been, oh my God, how dare they? And it's like that Hamas won the election. It was they had an election. The international community, the United States, we demand that the Palestinians have an election. It was a very, very fair election. And even according to all kinds of critics and all that, they said, yeah, Hamas won the election. So, but since then, it has just been the policy of Israel. No, they cannot have Hamas be their government. It's been the policy of the United States, been the policy of everyone. No, they're not allowed to have Hamas be their government. And that led to this whole situation. And I will say, I saw some of the videos of October 7th commemorations, and I was out in the streets. I did, covered quite a few rallies yesterday, and I can talk about that. But, you watch some of these videos of October 7th, and I'm watching it, and Israelis are describing, okay, I was in my house and these people kicked open the door and all this. And I'm thinking, well, gee, that's never happened to a Palestinian before. I mean, right. My goodness. Yeah. And it's like, you have to wonder, like, are the people who watch these pro-Israel, videos, it's like all the trauma from October 7th. It's like, yeah, this is all really, really awful. But you do notice that the Palestinians have been going through quite a lot, but it's like, they don't, like, somehow it just like they have this blank spot. Anything that happens to the Palestinians, it's all fake, it's all Pallywood, it's all, it didn't really happen, or they shouldn't be here, or they're actually Jordanians, or there's some like weird excuse. So like all the atrocities the Palestinians have been through year after year after year just don't exist. And then we're just supposed to cry for what happened to the Israelis on October 7th. And then, yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy. It's very surreal. Yeah. And the other thing though, so I was in the streets in New York. I covered So there were 3 rallies that I ended up covering yesterday, and I'm going to post video of them soon. I'm just going to edit and all of that. So I went to one rally in the Bronx. It was very small, but it was put on by a group. I can't remember their name, like anti-imperialist something or other. It was kind of a small group of like college-aged young people. And then they assembled at the Israeli consulate. They didn't have a permit, and it was a small group of people, but they all had their faces covered up. And they burned an American flag and an Israeli flag in front of the consulate. And there was kind of a scuffle, and 2 of them were arrested. And it was kind of a small rally, but they were making a point of being very, very theatrical. It was weird because it was a small rally, but a lot of media was there covering it, right? They didn't have a permit, and they were close to the consulate, on 2nd Avenue. And they were like, the streets were kind of blocked off. So they were like in the streets, and they were kind of surrounded by police, and they burned an Israeli flag and an American flag, and then they moved on. And then I went to the Fox News building. There was a really big crowd outside of Fox News. There was about 1,000 people outside of Fox News. It was your typical, Free Palestine rally in New York City. It was the, big rally outside of Fox News. They had the drums, and I think it was In Our Lifetime. They had their rally. So I did get to interview people there and all of that. And I don't know. I mean, it was interesting. The rally that got all this media attention that was very, very small. I mean, there were probably less than 15 of these like college-age young people. They were almost trying to redo the 1960s, right? They had a big banner that said "Bring the war home," and they all had their faces covered in the keffiyehs, and they were shouting, curse words, kind of, this fucking system, we need to fucking overthrow it. And it was some kind of like, they were almost kind of trying to, have the aesthetic of the 1960s weatherman or something like that. Bring the war home, kind of, I thought that was odd. I will say though, that one part of having a demonstration is theater, right? You got to play the part, and they did a much better job of that. I mean, even though their rallies were small, I mean, they did burn the flags, and they did, have their faces covered, and they, so they did it very theatrically, but it was quite small. And it was almost, again, kind of like they were playing a character. And I see a lot of this in politics, right? On both sides, when people are kind of reenacting or playing a character, right? That seems to be a lot of how our politics, it's we're trying to make sense of the weird moment our country is in right now, because we're in a very, very strange moment. And so everyone's trying to look for somebody from the past that they can kind of dress up as, and just like on the right, they're trying to be Ronald Reagan. Well, this is not the Reagan era. I mean, things have really changed. It's like they're trying to be the 60s left, which again, this isn't the 1960s. The Palestinians are not the Vietnamese. I mean, it's a complicated situation. I mean, some things obviously overlap, like imperialism, et cetera, but it's a different situation. And I don't know. I look at American politics. It's almost like we don't quite know what we're doing. We're in this new era, and nothing seems to make sense. And we're trying to reenact our past, but our past is distant, and these were different times. We're in completely new territory now. Information technology is changing how people interact with politics, how people understand themselves, even the nature of their own identity. And that, you can't recreate the past. I mean, things are different. Politics as it was, in the boomer generation, politics before that, we're in just a new time where we need to kind of innovate and figure out what to do. So
I think somebody made the point of saying, what was it like to live in Rome when it was in decline? It's that. It's like things don't work. Things like meeting the political space doesn't work. I mean, for God's sake, we're having a conversation. The government is shut down, right? I forget who I was talking to yesterday. I think it was Ted Rawl. Ted Rawl pointed out that when the pilot contacted air traffic control, they got a message effectively saying nobody is here. Like this stuff doesn't work. Like the Baltimore Bridge that was hit when that huge ship went AWOL. Well, that still hasn't been rebuilt. Wow. California, the inability to build high-speed rail, NASA budget being cut. And people may think that's small. I think that's major. Because, if you think back to what the United States was in its quote-unquote glory days, where it's like we put a man on the moon, and Kennedy is giving a speech. It was like, God damn it, we're putting a man on the moon. And it's like, this country that is only a few hundred years old is literally looking at a body in space and saying, we're going to do that. We don't have the ability to do it yet. We're going to do it. Damn it. That's what we're going to do. Why does a man go to the mountains? Why does, Navy play Army in the football league? I mean, he makes this amazing speech with this culmination. We're going to put a man on the goddamn moon. And now we don't even do that. Even that budget is being cut. This ability to look beyond ourselves into this kind of larger realm of transcendence. Done, gone. This is where we are, purely domestic, purely locked into this. No, I think I understand your point. People are looking back to something to find some level of solidity and identity in a time where this country is no longer what this country was, and it's becoming very clear that that's the case. It's declining. It's a degradation. There was something else you said. You're talking about. Well, let me go to this part. You're saying that the killing needs to stop. Agreed. But is Hamas going to give up their guns? I don't. That seems to be a red line. I don't like. They would have to trust. We'll give up our weapons. We'll give up the hostages, and we're going to completely and entirely trust Israel to do what they say they're going to do in the deal, even though they've never done it in the deal.
Right.
And isn't there another way to look at this? That yes, the killing needs to stop. Yes, Israel has been able to murder a huge number of people, but the fact that Israel wants a deal in this way, meaning they've lost so many of their soldiers. I mean, the numbers is in tens of thousands. You may have an Israel that is exhausted, and that exhaustion is pushing them to try to get something in order to give their people a rest, which is not an indication of Israel in this kind of brimming, powerful way that may be more illusionary. This may be an exhausted military that is looking for any breather that it can get, even if it has to go through some level of a deal in this way to get that breather. Give me your thoughts on that.
Well, Israel being exhausted is absolutely the case. I mean, that seems to be the thing, is the population is not with Netanyahu. Netanyahu has a layer of very, very hardcore supporters who want to keep this going. But, the protests around the hostages and all of that, I mean, the population of Israel is tired of this, and they're weary of this. They want the hostages to come home, and they want some kind of deal to be made, and they've wanted that for a long time. And that the polls in Israel indicate that while the Israelis, yes, tend to support the Israeli position, and they obviously don't like Hamas, they don't like the Palestinians, that they're not with Netanyahu, and that Netanyahu, many people have pointed out, he's doing this. He's prolonging this for his own reasons, that his political career will end as soon as this confrontation is over. And the population is very weary of it. And they're not behind Netanyahu on this at all, right? And that Israel is very divided, and Netanyahu's support tends to be much more recent immigrants to Israel from Eastern Europe that are much more conservative and such. But you go to the folks who live in regions of Israel that are not settlements, right? Those folks tend to be much more liberal, and they're tired of this, right? And obviously they don't like the Palestinians, but they're tired of this, and that Netanyahu is kind of, his grip on power is very limited, and he's been kept keeping this going for his own reasons. That's a widespread perception that I've seen.
Did you hear Putin's answer? Speaking of Eastern immigrants, Putin was asked this by Professor Morandi, and several of the people who was at Valdai are guests on the show. For some reason, it made me feel proud. It's like one thing of separation, 1 degree of separation. Kofi was there, Morandi was there. I know Rick Sanchez, he was there. There was somebody else that was on the show that was there. Glenn Deason has been on the show before, he was there. So there were a few people that were there. They were able to ask questions. But Morandi asked this interesting question that I think he may have been surprised by the answer that Putin gave on this. He effectively presented saying, look, Donald Trump has come up with this that I know Morandi knows is a BS plan.
Yeah.
And is putting this out there to try to get the Palestinians to sign. And effectively asking Putin, hey, what is your take on this? Are you okay with this? Is there something that Russia could do to move this along? And Putin gave this answer that, I have to be honest, surprised me, and maybe even surprised Morandi, where Putin was like, hey, I'm okay with the deal. I think it's a good deal. I think Tony Blair, and he goes into this thing talking about how he had coffee or tea with Tony Blair. And people like me are like, what the hell is with this answer? I don't understand this. I remember Sarah once before made this point of saying the number of Israelis that were that were Russian.
Yeah.
And because there was such a large Russian population of Israelis, that this has some, let's say not necessarily control, but awareness in Putin's mind of that population of, let's say, Russian Israelis that are in Israel. And on some level, this either constrains, some level gives some kind of context to its point of view on what is taking place there. I mean, granted, I know you can't necessarily get into his mind, but that answer is bewildering to me. Putin has to know that this is BS. He has to know that Israel is a colony of the U.S. and it's kind of the tip of the spear going after one of the main countries that he's in alliance with, meaning being Iran. That answer is very bizarre to me. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's interesting because at one point, President Putin was very outspoken and sympathetic to Israel and was seen as almost friendly with Netanyahu.
Right.
And since the October 7th events 2 years ago, Russia has really pivoted in an anti-Israel way and made clear that they don't approve of what Israel's doing. They've been speaking against them at the UN Security Council. And, there's a much bigger gap between Russia and Israel than there has been in quite some time. And that it's quite surprising. But there is a layer of Russian-speaking Israelis, who are very, very pro-Russia, and they are sympathetic to Russia, but they're very, very, very much the hardcore right-wing Likud, Netanyahu supporters, and that's a layer of Israel that does exist, and I think that they were much more solidly intact. But in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of distance. I mean, Russia is pretty much taking anti-Israel stances at the UN, et cetera. I mean, they do refer to Hamas as terrorists. They do argue that Israel has a, quote, right to exist. They're not, for the destruction of Israel. They're not, anti-Israel in that sense, but they are, they're very, very opposed to what Israel is doing. I mean, again, I think that when I hear Putin saying what he's saying, and the fact that the Dr. Morandi was in the room there, I mean, I think this is more of the politics of the possible. Right? They're thinking about what is actually possible. This proposal, I mean, it may be supporting it is strategic in the sense that it can lead to something else, and that it probably won't be. And I think everyone realizes. I mean, you heard Trump say, "Oh yeah, we're gonna make sure everybody enforces it." It's like, yeah, right. Everyone kind of realizes this deal isn't going to be what actually comes out of it, right? But moving to implement it could be moving toward a potentially better situation. And I think that Russia. One thing I will say about Russia is they play a long game, right? Not a short game. They're thinking long term. Right. And that, if you're playing the long game, moving ahead with this deal could eventually set the stage for something better. It would be moving away from the current phase of things, which is just the endless bombardment of Gaza. Right. It would be at least putting that on hold. And there's, maybe at that point, then a new situation. But yeah, like you said, the way the deal is set up, the idea that would hold and everyone would just adhere to the deal, that's not realistic at all. So what's going to happen?
What would be the long game on this? I mean, because I was thinking about this and I was there are times I try to step outside of myself to the degree that I can and say, okay, is your point of view too hardened on this? And are you looking at this in a particular way that obviously other world leaders may not be? And let's say if you because I think Morandi was shocked by the answer, because as you point out, Russia has been taking a more strident stance against Israel. And more to the point, Israel is trying to take down one of the countries that is a fulcrum to this kind of multipolar world. I mean, Israel tried to destroy Iran, and every expectation in the world is that a new war is about to erupt between where Israel is going to attack Iran again with the United States backing on that attack. And so it's like, okay, so Russia has to know 3 a.m. between Putin and his God that Israel is a problem, especially in the context of multipolarity and that type of world, as opposed to having a hegemon in the Middle Eastern region that the U.S. is effectively backing as a proxy. And so it's like, okay, so what would be the long game on accepting this deal? Okay, yeah, the killing stops, but does it? I mean, Donald Trump had put out a tweet effectively saying, hey, the killing has stopped, and it was like 50 people died that day or were murdered that day by Israel.
Yeah.
I guess I don't see the long game for this. Is it just the moment that Israel violates the deal that the other countries are going to scream, hey, we all agreed to this deal, 15 countries, including all of Europe, and you're now violating this deal, and Trump is going to blame Hamas, and the killing is going to keep going? I guess, what is the long view of this that I may be missing?
Also, I mean, part of the deal is Hamas disarms. Part of the deal is this. I mean, there's a lot of implementation that has to go into this deal. And the question is, what gets implemented before the deal gets wrecked? right? What actually goes into effect? Obviously all of the, like, I think it's 20 points in the deal. All the 20 points don't get done immediately, right?
Right.
They get done bit by bit. So how much of it gets done before Israel violates it, before, they declare, oh, Hamas violated it, so then we're going to violate it, or, what happens? Well, we'll see. We shall see. But I feel like Russia is being strategic, and that also I think it's very important that Russia make clear they are not advocating instability in the region, right? That Russia, they do want to play a stabilizing role, and that they're not, just trying to fire up the Iran opposing Israel is very much part of their identity, the revolution, the
Yes.
supreme leader, Khomeini called the Day of Al-Quds. The last Friday of Ramadan is a day that they talk about taking back Jerusalem, for the Palestinians and all that. So Iran has to just be completely hard-lined. They cannot give Israel anything. Whereas Russia, they have to make clear their role is more as an international actor, as a world power that is trying to stabilize and bring peace. So it seems like there is a proposal on the table, and they're saying, okay, well, yeah, we can work with this. And I think that's Russia, making clear that they are a responsible kind of international actor, and they want to de-escalate things. Whereas a lot of the countries that they are very friendly with, especially Iran, they have a different way of viewing things. I feel like, again, there's more that we're not aware of.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And they might have fell back into a corner. I mean, for one, they're not going to have any say so one way or the other over the issue. And so it's like, okay, so why would we take an oppositional stance if we're not going to have any say so one way or the other? The countries that are going to be involved are going to be Middle Eastern countries. So does it benefit Russia to say, well, obviously this plan is BS, when they have no take in it, meaning they have no hand in it. They have no cards in this process. Turkey, Egypt, hell, maybe even Saudi Arabia, all of these are the countries that are going to have more hand in this, in which case they've already come out saying, we agree. So I don't know. It could just boil down to there's no political gain for us to be oppositional to the plan, considering we're not going to have a say-so one way or the other in the plan. I don't know. You may be right. There may be stuff that we're just not seeing in this. Last thing before I let you go, Iran. Everybody that I've talked to on this channel, generals, colonels, people who are in the military, people who have been analysts, all of them have come to the same assessment that an attack is inevitable, it's imminent. Do you see it that way? That the US and Israel are effectively going to hit Iran one more time? And I got to be honest, I don't see how they don't. Like, all of this is playbook stuff. The moment that you say, we're going to pass sanctions, then you already know, almost as a chess move, well, Iran is immediately going to stop working with the IAEA. All right. Iran may even pull out of the non-proliferation treaty. All right. Both these rational acts from putting sanctions on them and snapback sanctions. China and Russia said, we're not going to participate in this. We're out. And on top of that, the US will then comes up and say, well, we're concerned now about nuclear material. And Israel will say, well, we're also concerned about nuclear material. Meaning, it's not like sanctions is a pretext that you can follow, kind of a logic way of saying, well, the US is going to come back with this argument of, well, we can't allow Iran to get nukes. They're going to have nukes in 20 minutes. And so we need to actually have some kind of strike. On top of that, it was reported right here. There's reports now that the United States is talking about piracy with regards to Iran, that they're trying to, or considering, stealing ships and the cargo in those ships. Now, the US is apparently pressuring the regional actors, Saudi Arabia, etc., to assist in the pirating. These countries have resisted up to this point. Iran has made the point of saying, touch our ships, we're going to go nuclear. Meaning, I don't mean that in the literal sense of nuclear weapons. I just mean we're going to lose it. Effectively saying right here, Al-Mayadeen reported, quoted Iranian sources saying that all signs have been detected that the U.S. preparations to obstruct or interfere with the movement of Iranian commercial ships under the pretext of enforcing sanctions. According to the report, any such U.S. action will, quote, face immediate and decisive response, unquote. Iranian sources also said, or told Al-Mayadeen, that both the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Navy, and the Iranian Army's Navy, that's right, because those are two different things, are fully prepared to neutralize any threat targeting maritime security in the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman. And this last part, Al-Mayadeen added that any move against Iranian commercial or civilian vessels would be met with immediate reaction from Iran's naval forces and coastal missile bases along the country's southern shores. I guess first question is, do you believe them? There's that. And two, give me your expectation in the way that this unfolds. This seems like it's headed towards imminent war.
Well, Iran their behavior here is completely rational.
Yes.
Iran has never been trying to get a nuclear weapon, and they have always fully complied with all of their obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Then on top of that, they made a deal with the Obama administration and gave up almost all of their peaceful nuclear energy program. In exchange for that deal, they got bombed and attacked, and they got more sanctions imposed on them. They got Qasem Soleimani murdered. And the latest development is that the International Atomic Energy Agency, which oversees Iran's nuclear sites, would not condemn the U.S. attack on their facility. And at that point, it was just such a slap in the face. The IAEA oversees nuclear facilities, and rather than condemn the United States attacking and blowing up a nuclear site, they went out of their way to find some excuse that Iran's not, they didn't cross the I or dot the T's, and they condemned Iran in that situation. So at that point, the IAEA is just acting in such a blatantly partisan way and just kind of going out of its way to disrespect Iran. Iran's saying, you know what? Fine, we're just pulling out. And it makes complete sense that they would do that, right? When you have an international body that is supposed to protect, nuclear sites and oversee the protection, and the United States blows it up and they don't say anything about it and they don't condemn what the USA did, at that point, what are you going to do? I mean, you have to pull out. I mean, you have to make a statement. The IAEA has acted in such a blatantly partisan way and has gone out of its way to disrespect Iran. I mean, how can you have such an entity in your country monitoring your nuclear sites if they're okay with other countries attacking them? I mean, that's just, that's
Agreed.
Yeah.
I was just agreed.
Yeah.
One of my guests was pointing out, like, it's so wild that diplomacy is not added. But that's just it. Diplomacy was added to it. I mean, I think what some people miss is that this has nothing to do with nukes. This has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with the fact that Iran exists, that it breathes air.
Yeah.
That this idea for diplomacy, well, Iran did go through diplomacy. They were attacked in the middle of diplomacy. And piracy is an act of war. Like, by any stretch of the imagination, you stealing boats is an act of war.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what negotiation are we going to engage with you in when you've attacked us in the last negotiations that we were taking part in? We were negotiating in good faith. And over again, there was this escalation of demands just beyond the horizon where you could always create this thing of, well, Iran is not giving us what we want. All of this stuff was playbook, pathway to Persia. And so, I mean, yeah, you would want an irrational, normal world where international law exists, where you can have diplomacy and diplomats. But even in that context, the idea that the U.S. gets to tell another country that they can't have nukes when Israel has nukes, the U.S. has nukes, Iran is a sovereign country. That's nonsense to me. That's nonsense to me. Yeah, I agree with you, Caleb. I don't know what else you do in that situation. You could say, please don't take my boats. You could send a strongly worded letter. That is going to be fundamentally ignored. Give me your take. One last, I guess, what time is it? One last question on this. This idea of requiring a response. I mean, obviously, what the United States wants is an escalatory ladder. And in stealing a boat will be similar to murdering people in Venezuela. There's a force distribution difference between Venezuela and Iran, where Iran has a force distribution that can actually impart cost. But Iran, up to this point, has done any and everything in their power to stay out of a larger conflict with the U.S., including in that last conflict where they were willing to take that off-ramp. That was, Israel is the one that was begging for the war to stop. But at the point where Iran was bombed, they were willing to make the deal with the U.S. of, okay, you bomb us, we bomb you, we call it a day. Do you think this will be quantitatively different? And I guess the reason why I asked about the ship thing, do you believe that they would do it, considering up to this point that they've done everything in their power under the guise of pragmatism?
we've been through this before. There's been Iranian ships that have been seized. They hold them for a little while. Iran does some, seizes some other ships.
Their own, right.
I think we've been through this before. I don't think it's going to be a huge game changer if this escalates. It shouldn't happen. I mean, obviously, it shouldn't happen, but I don't see it as something that's going to be like, oh gosh, the USA grabs an Iranian ship and then we have a nuclear war. I don't think it's going to be that. I think it will be, if it happens, it will be a bad situation. Iran will retaliate and probably, bring their ships very close to American ships, maybe even seize an American ship and hold some sailors. They've done that before. These maritime games are kind of standard between the USA and Iran at this point. They're almost, part of the, it's just kind of par for the course. Unfortunately, it's not good. It's a violation of Iran's sovereignty, and the USA is the aggressor, and they always manage to make it sound like somehow Iran is the one being aggressive every time they do this. But the US media makes it sound like it just came out of nowhere. It's always they never give the context of what's going on, and and bring our boys home, and and all of that. But at the same time, I don't feel like this will be the end of the world if it does happen. It'll be something that Iran has dealt with before, something the United States has done before. Iran is capable of retaliating, and it'll just be an unfortunate escalation. And it'll be very important. It'll be something that Netanyahu can politically gain from. It can be something that Trump can gain from by saying, "Look what I'm doing. I'm fighting Iran." And you remember when in South Korea, right? Iran had its own money in South Korea that was frozen. Mm-hmm. Biden made some kind of deal, so Iran's money was unfrozen. And what we heard, the narrative that we got in Western media was Biden gave so many $1 million to Iran. He didn't give them.
Yes.
The USA stole their money, froze their money, and in exchange for something, unfroze it, right? That's not giving Iran, but that's the Israel. Oh, they're giving all this money to Iran. No, they're not giving them any money. They stole and then unstole
their money, right?
Yeah, right.
It's their own money. Yeah.
So I don't know. That's you can't trust American media to ever talk about anything related to Iran in a rational way. I will say I am disappointed because for a while it seemed like U.S. coverage of North Korea was getting to be sane, but now they've backed away from that, right? And they're running stories that remind me of the Bush years, the stories that they're running where they take something that happened in North Korea that is, and they wildly exaggerate it in order to just make fun of them, and people don't know what's going on. I mean, have you seen this? I mean, a classic example during the Bush years, or I think it was during the Obama administration, in North Korea, they had an archaeological site, and it was the tomb of a unicorn, right? It was just, that's what the writing on it said, right? And it was just, okay. So all the American media, North Korea believes in unicorns. And it's like, that's not what it is. They just found an archaeological site, and the writing was, it had mythological stuff on it or whatever, right? Well, now the latest thing with North Korea is they're doing this whole thing about North Korea. Kim Jong-un has said, look, we don't believe in, cosmetic surgery. We don't think women should, we don't think it's a good use of resources for women to be getting boob jobs, right? And I mean, that makes sense. You can understand a country that's facing sanctions and all that. We shouldn't be wasting our resources on things like that. And that they have kind of a very socially conservative aspect of their socialism. So Kim Jong-un made like a passing remark. We don't believe in that. They're saying, oh, North Korea is having a crackdown on boobs. They're inspecting. It's like, that's not what's happening. And it's frustrating to watch American media do this, right? And what's frustrating is it's like, if you actually read between the lines in the story, all that happened is the leader of North Korea said, look, we don't want to be like the West. We don't want to have, people wasting money and resources on cosmetic surgeries and things like that, which is a perfectly defensible thing to say. But of course, in American media, they make it, they be silly about it. Right. And that's kind of, it's the same with the Iran coverage. They always find like it becomes, like they're going out of their way to not tell you what's actually happening, to just kind of play silly games. So, yeah, I don't know. That's kind of how I interpret a lot of this stuff.
I don't know about you, but personally, I prefer women to be natural. Like I mean, to each his own, of course. People can get whatever they want. But yeah, I've always been more of a sucker for people who look normal.
Okay,
That's just me. Caleb, and that has nothing to do with the story at all. I was like, this is a war on boobs in
Yeah.
North Korea.
All right.
Yeah, I understand where they're coming from. It's under sanctions. You have to save your materials, and yeah, it's more of a conservative society. Caleb, as I say, you can talk about some of anything. You have my deepest appreciation for it. You are great at this, and I thank you for it. Caleb Maupin, speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, author. Give 2 of your books, because I have this one, Kamala Harris. That one is old. There was another one about the shooting that took place with the gentleman. I can't think of the exact name of it, but you know the name of these books. Please give us the name of these books.
Yeah, well, we got Trotsky and the Neoconservatives. That's my latest, right? This book has been getting a lot of attention lately. What is a counter gang? I noticed there's been a couple of YouTube channels that did reviews of it. It's a chapter from one of my bigger books. I made it a small kind of pamphlet. What is a counter gang? And it's gotten quite a bit of attention for what I said.
What is a counter gang?
Yeah, well, you have to read the book and find out, right?
Fair enough.
The term was coined by Frank Kitson, the guy who led the British operations in Kenya against the Mau Mau Land and Freedom Army.
Oh, you and I spoke about this. Yeah, we've had a show about this.
Right.
Okay.
And it's a way to confuse the resistance, a way to confuse and it's an effective counterinsurgency strategy. But in this book, I get into great detail about counter gangs. What is a counter gang? So check it out. Yeah.
Basically counter operations or counterinsurgencies in countries themselves. Yeah, we had a really good conversation. That video actually did quite well.
Yeah.
Video did quite well. Caleb, man, you have my deepest appreciation. By the way, the Center for Political Innovation, that is the organization that Caleb is associated with. Also, you can check him out on his YouTube channel, Caleb Maupin. Caleb, you have a fantastic day, man.
You too. Always fun. Talk to you soon.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. Bye-bye. All right. Caleb, shout out to Caleb. Caleb invited me to give my first speech. This was at an event in Washington, D.C. It was quite possibly the coldest day on earth. There was like military all around. I think it was during Christmas or something. But whatever the time period, it was freezing. I've never been that cold in my life. But the event was really good. I think Garland was at that event. There were a few other people. It is very weird being recognized. That is an experience I haven't necessarily gotten accustomed to yet. When I was in D.C., it would happen every random blue moon where somebody says, "Hey, are you Jamal Thomas?" It's like, who's asking? Who's asking me this? But no, shout out to Caleb, man. He is my deepest appreciation for coming on. I always enjoy these conversations. And as I say, Caleb can talk about some of anything. The counter gang one was a really good video. He goes into how there seems to be a counter operation that's taking place in society that confuses people. It's difficult to draw your lines in regards to opposition to what is taking place in regards to the government because of so much stuff that is thrown into it. And that stuff may not necessarily be random. That stuff may actually be intentional in the way that it's functioning in operation. No, definitely check out the video. He goes into the book, or you can just buy the book itself. He is a prolific author. I'm going to go to my chats because we have a few minutes before Garland comes on. Yeah, we have a few minutes before Garland comes on. Let's go to chats. And by the way, like, share, subscribe. We have over 800 people here. Thank you for being here. Definitely hit the like button. Definitely share, subscribe. You can support PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats, buy me a coffee. I think I said PayPal already. Super stickers, all of those things are things that can contribute to the show. You guys makes the show what it is. You guys makes the show run. Your donations, you have my appreciation for them. Let's go to these. Fahad, I think this is Saroon. Have you watched Michael Moore's documentary, Fahrenheit 9/11? Yes, I have watched the documentary. It was a damn good documentary. Had Bin Laden's family society secretly flown out when no one else could fly? Yes. Fahrenheit 9/11 was a damn good one. I got to be honest with you, Piers. I've had this conversation with Piers before, kind of. And the first time I had the conversation with him, I was just kind of like, dude, I don't buy this premise. I just don't buy the premise. I have evolved. Maybe not to the point of believing that these guys hit the towers, but definitely to the point of clearly there was a cover-up. Clearly somebody knew something that was going to take place. Obviously, Building 7 didn't just fall magically. Like, meaning there's so many questions associated with this. And the CIA may be able to say, yeah, we just royally F stuff up. Yeah, fair enough. But the people who are, let's say, more cynical about this, I mean cynicism in a negative sense. That I'm not using this in a negative sense, meaning it almost as a literal sense. They have a right to be. They obviously covered this up. They obviously are hiding information. They never did a legitimate and real investigation. And the fact that it took Tucker effing Carlson on YouTube, of all places, to go through and talk to the individuals that were there, to bring up the records that were there, to go through the interviews, to go to the fact that they didn't have a real investigation, and to be able to bring up the records to show that they didn't have a real investigation. It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. Tucker on that one is doing God's work. It's a fantastic documentary series. Definitely check it out. I don't know how much you know about it, but your mind will be blown on some of that stuff in regards to what they were trying to do, and then the fact that they covered it up after the fact. An immediate pivot to, now let's go to war. It's just mind-blowing. Red Dye 40 gifted Jamal membership. Well, thank you, Red Dye 40. Shout out to you. Gifted another membership, Red Dye 40. Again, shout out to you. Thank you very much for that. Pink Rose, never trust the USA and even less Israel. I would say don't trust either. I would say don't trust either. The rub for Hamas, though, is that they're in a difficult situation. And when you're in a situation like that, and you have all of these people being killed, there's pressure, there's leverage. And so they are obviously looking into the deal. They're obviously negotiating on various aspects of the deal. Maybe many of these countries are thinking that they can come out saying, well, we at least got a deal on the table. We at least got something that we were able to sign you down to. And we, I don't know, 10 other countries are looking at the fact that this deal is taking place. But call me skeptical. At the moment that Israel does anything, the United States is going to turn around and say it's Hamas's fault, and the killing is just going to restart. I don't think that's a cynical point of view. I think that's a legit, accurate point of view. I mean, for God's sake, this is Gaza right now. This is what it looks like. Houses, hospitals, all of these things have just been destroyed. And if you ever get the opportunity, I think I have the clip somewhere where they do this kind of aerial view of what's left. It's like nothing left. You would have to believe that there was Hamas hiding in every house, doghouse, every apartment building, etc., for that to be legit. And even if that was the case, it still wouldn't be legit. It is murder on a mass scale. And in having a murder on a mass scale, you basically have the United States effectively co-signing it. Because the U.S. is co-signing it, other countries don't necessarily want to get involved. They are, quote unquote, realists. And so they would continue to trade with Israel. They would continue to work with Israel, despite the fact that they would grandstand and complain about Israel, despite having all of these trade deals and working relationships with the country that is effectively doing it. So, yeah, it's grotesque, to put it mildly. And I guess a lot of people are looking at if you can get the killing to stop. I guess the question is, does the killing stop? And I don't really have an answer for that. This is Gaza. This is what I was looking for. Aerial view of what's happening. I guess these are burned out cars that are there. This is not what I wanted. Yeah, this is not what I wanted. I'm looking for something specific. There was a video that gives an entire aerial view of what's left of Gaza. And it is breathtaking. It is breathtaking. The idea that that much damage could be done and the world stands there and just watches. They don't want to get involved. I get some people are saying they're taking the long view, but I mean, look at this. By the way, kids at school, Zionist lunatics, brown shirts, burst into the school. Now, just to set the context for this, as a child that's there, that they've killed your mom, uncle, cousins, teachers, hospital workers, all of the stuff. I would imagine many of these kids have other kids that have been viciously murdered by these same goons. And these kids are sitting in school seeing murderers walking into the school. Let's keep going. Day in the life in Gaza. A day in the life in Gaza. That's what that is. That's what that is. What do you do with that? Like, I showed you the video once where Israel bombed a school or bombed near a school that was in Lebanon and how the kids freaked out. And you think to yourself, this is what these kids are effectively living with on a daily basis. Those kids are literally trying to just get an education in school, whatever the hell they're going to teach. Goons escort everybody out, destroy the school. Thankfully, they didn't murder all of those kids that were in that school with them, considering the number of babies that they've already murdered. Let me go to my guests. We are joined, the man himself, looking sharp today, Garland Nixon. How you doing, man? You doing okay? Oh, I can't hear you, girl. I can't hear you.
Oh, there we go.
There you are.
Yeah, I switched my mic, and whenever you switch mics, it automatically mutes you. Yes, great.
No, you're perfectly fine. You're looking sharp today, man.
Thanks. A nice shirt too.
Well, thank you.
Jumping out, man.
I do my best. I do my best. It's hot here, so it's like you're just sitting here sweating bullets, and you're like, Jamal, cut on the air. We don't want you to suffer for us like this. It's like, it's okay. I'm going to suffer. I got to bear the burden. No, man, I'm really glad that you could join me. You are the person that I want to talk to today, especially for this particular topic. We're joined with Garland Nixon. He is a radio host, YouTube host. You do all sorts of events around the country. I see you in one event after the next. And you also have your YouTube channel on the Garland Nixon channel. Definitely check Garland out. He has some damn good interviews on that channel. He has some damn good guests that come on that channel. How you doing, man? You doing okay today?
Great. Busy, as always.
What is it? Busy?
You know,
yeah.
As always. I'm an ADD person, so I'm always, when people ask me the description of what I call ADD, I say it's like feeling like you got 100 things to do in 5 minutes to do them. A constant feeling of I got 100 things to do, but I only got 5 minutes to do it. And someone says, "What do you have to do?" I don't know, but I got to do something, and I got to do it quick.
It's like something's always going on.
Exactly.
I want to play this for you. This is Trump. You used to be a former police officer, which is why I am very interested in your take on everything that has been taking place, because I have a very dark point of view on what Donald Trump has been doing in regards to, it's not just the military. A lot of people think that it's the military part. It's not just that. What is it called? The posse.
Posse Comitatus.
Thank you, Posse Comitatus. That act, when DHS was created, that act had already been in existence, meaning there's nothing covering Trump's ability to pull people from either ICE or any organization that is under the Department of Homeland Security. So he has a cacophony of goons that he can grab from these agencies, not just the military. And so I think people need to realize that when the courts are saying, no, you can't put military in this location. Okay, A, that doesn't seem to stop him from doing it.
Right.
But B, he has other agencies and other organizations. I mean, for God's sake, ICE had black op helicopters. They raided the building. They were pulling out Americans, meaning this is not even just immigrants. These are Americans whose rights are also being violated. And the article that I sent you earlier today, I think it was from Bulwark, I was shocked at the level of depravity that's taking place in Chicago right now, where these guys are just making Chicago into a war zone. Donald Trump was asked about whether or not he was going to push through the Insurrection Act, because that seems to be where they are headed on this. Listen to what he has to say. He points this up, which should be chilling to anybody.
The primary guarantee is once this deal happens, if it does happen. Look,
Damn it, wrong one. This one. Let's go to this one. Okay, here we are.
Well, I do it if it was necessary. So far, it hasn't been necessary, but we have an Insurrection Act for a reason. If I had to enact it, I'd do that. If people were being killed and courts were holding us up, or governors or mayors were holding us up, sure, I'd do that. I mean, I want to make sure that people aren't killed. We have to make sure that our cities are safe. And
he's making this up. Like, all of this is just him making this up. Even the whole thing with flipping Charlie Kirk's murder into a political cudgel, where it immediately becomes Charlie Kirk is dead. Oh my God, the left killed Charlie Kirk. Now we have to go after Antifa, and we're going to put through some kind of executive order to go after Antifa. And these cities are unsafe. People are dying left and right. So Donald Trump, may need to put through the Insurrection Act if the judges keep striking down my illegal orders, or if the governors don't respond because I'm making this up. That's very chilling to me. Give me your take on that. I mean, because he's trying to argue that, well, the police in these areas aren't doing their job, so I have to put the military in.
A couple of things. Number one, and there's the contradiction, with Trump and his ilk, or with the ruling elite period, that we're always talking about. We've got to increase law enforcement. We got to increase the police, because more money for the police, because the police have to do this or that. And then whenever they, have a whim of cracking down even more, it turns into, okay, the police aren't doing their job. So therefore, I don't know what is he going to go to defund the police next? Is he going to be like, well, no point giving money to the police. Let's defund the police. And then we'll just send it sounds like to me that's the direction he's going. The police can't do their job. I guess next Trump's going to be a defund the police guy from the right. But at any rate, there are a couple of things here. One of the big problems, I need to bring this up. One of the big problems with bringing in federal agents, whether it's ICE or Border Patrol or something like that, is this. And that is that these agencies have special powers when it comes to the border. And that has to do with commerce. And the reason I know was because my agency, we had all the police responsibilities on the Chesapeake Bay. Certainly we had on land also, but Chesapeake Bay, which is a major artery and international artery and all of that kind of stuff, drug dealing, the whole 9 yards, major boat trafficking. So one of the issues is we got customs training. Once you get customs training, once you get certified, that means as long as I can make it an argument that someone can leave the country and come back, like if I'm on the bay and I see a boat, if it's a 12-foot runabout, or 16-foot runabout, I can't make an argument that they can go all the way outside of the U.S. and come back, because they'd have to go out of the bay and 3 miles offshore. Okay. But if it's, let's say, a 40-foot sailboat, well, a 40-foot sailboat or a big trawler, I can say they can leave it, which means now I don't need a search warrant or anything. See, the customs, that's now, it's about commerce.
You lost me on this. I don't understand.
Okay, I can now search that boat. You lose your constitutional rights. I can now search that boat. You see, once I have customs authority, what that means is I'm not searching for contraband, like, I don't know, fentanyl or something. I'm searching for, let's say you bring a plant or some species that could be an invasive species, or let's say you would bring money in, or you would bring very expensive stuff that you don't declare in customs, right? I'm effectively saying, since you can leave the United States and come back in this boat, you're going through customs.
Oh, I see.
And I can check everything that you have. You see what I'm saying? Okay. Now, if I send ICE or Border Patrol or whoever to Detroit, well, all you got to do is cross the border of Detroit, and you're in 20 minutes. And you're in, really, once you get on whatchamacallit, 5 minutes, you cross the bridge and you're in Canada, right? So once you send the regular police, they've got to have all of your, they've got to respect all your constitutional rights and all that kind of stuff. But Border Patrol now can argue, you can cross the border and come back. I don't have to go through all that warrant stuff. I'm doing a search just like it's a customs search. You see what I'm saying? So now that I'm ICE or Border Patrol, I can say, you're very close to the Canada line. I'm checking for illegal immigrants and anything they may or may have not have brought. So I'll do a customs search. So I don't need a warrant. I don't need any of that stuff. I don't need to give you your rights. I don't need anything. Not for when you go through customs, when you come back from another country, you ain't got rights. You come through customs. You can't say you can't look in my bag without a warrant. They don't need a warrant. Right. And once ICE, Border Patrol, they all have customs certification authority. So what that allows the government to now do is to ignore your constitutional rights and just proclaim now, I'm doing a customs search. I'm not doing a regular search. But while I'm doing this custom search, should I find cocaine or something that you shouldn't have, it's admissible in court. Normally, a search without a warrant or a search without exigent circumstances wouldn't be admissible in court. In a custom search, it is admissible in court because I don't need a warrant. That's the danger, especially when it comes to, now, if it's in Atlanta or something, maybe not. But if it's in any city that's near the border, or theoretically, if it's close to a waterway where I could go to another country, but that's a lot harder because now I got to prove that you have a boat that you could use to get there. But you get my point.
Yeah.
Detroit, anywhere close to the Canadian or Mexican line, then the Constitution's out the window as far as searches.
That's outrageous.
That's the real danger.
I mean, but look at Chicago, for example. These guys have been snatching Americans out of their houses. They have no just cause for any of this stuff. I mean, it's one thing if you say, okay, I've identified an individual there that is an illegal immigrant, however you made that identification, and you go to the door and you try to get the person in that way.
Right.
Even that's a little dodgy, but okay. That's not what they've been doing. I mean, they've been just snatching even Americans, having them outside, in some cases going after politicians like who've been protesting. And it doesn't seem like any of these rights are being, it seems like these rights are being ignored. Meaning the Bill of Rights seems to be blown off right now.
Far worse than that. We're going back to the Magna Carta. Remember, a man's home is his castle. Right. Castle doctrine, right? All of these, the rules and laws that, give you privacy in your own home. The police can't search without a warrant or, without exigent circumstances for a warrant, such as they walk by your house and they hear somebody scream, help, my God, he's going to kill me. Okay, don't need a warrant. They walk by and they look, and they're during the normal course of their duties, they're walking down the street and they look and your window's open and they see a body laying there. Well, yeah. Okay, right. Those kinds of things, right. They don't need a warrant. But absent those outstanding issues that are known as exigent circumstances, they need a warrant. But why do they need a warrant? We're going back to the Magna Carta. A man's home is his castle, the castle doctrine, right? That there's a lot of things regarding defense of your home and all. So what you're now saying is that's what basically British common law, which the United States is based on British common law, with the exception of Louisiana, which is based on Napoleonic Code. But forget all of that. The important thing being, we're just saying, you know what? Who cares about that British common law? It's not just going against the 4th and 5th Amendments, freedom from, unreasonable search and seizure. Okay, it's not just going against that. It's going against the foundation that was built on, which is English common law, which is the man's house and is his castle. It's that's
No, please finish. No, please finish.
Can see, I could see over the course of years, starting with the Patriot Act, and then Obama, saying we can arrest people or kill people who are American citizens, and if you're a terrorist, we deem you a terrorist. You no longer have your constitutional rights. You know what I mean? You could see the deterioration going to get where we're going. It's not like we woke up one day and this happened. And many of us has been screaming, remember Biden? Yes, we've got to put in all of these. And we reported on it at our radio station, these domestic terrorist laws. And we're like, oh, that don't sound good. So, you could just see the deterioration of the very foundations of law coming for many years. And it was inevitable. that we were going to get to the point where they're like, yeah, let's just put let's bypass the issue of police. We don't need them. We'll just put government goons on the street and grab anybody we want. Oh, by the way, they'll have on black masks. You can't even see them and know who they are and identify them.
Can't even identify them. Can't even.
How about
identify
this?
them.
Some woman, if a police officer's arresting one, whatever, and one cop walks up and goes, "Hey, I'm going to squeeze her breast." Boom, squeeze her breast. She looks at him. His name is Officer Nixon. She can file a complaint against Officer Nixon, right? She looks at his face. Okay, that's Officer Nixon. He squeezed my breast. I can file a complaint with the department, and there's procedures and all of that, right? If these goons come up, they're dressed in all black. The only thing's out is their eyes. There's no name tag. I will guarantee you that ICE or Border Patrol or all of them have policies and procedures for people to file a complaint against one of their personnel. But how can you file a complaint if there's no name tag and you can't see his face?
Yeah.
So realistically, these people can come in, 12 of them, beat you up, sexually assault you, eat your food, do everything else, and leave. And it can be obvious that they not only violated the law, but violated their own policies and procedures. But how are you going to file a complaint when you don't know who they are because there's 12 guys there and none of them have a name tag and you couldn't see any of their faces? They're effectively anonymous, jackbooted thugs.
So this is the Bulwark. It's the guy was doing an investigation into what was taking place in Chicago. This stuff is outrageous. Like just royally outrageous. September 12th, ICE agents shoot and kill Chicago resident Silverto Villegas Gonzalez in Franklin Park. ICE claimed that Gonzalez was shot after being seriously injured by ICE agent or seriously injured ICE agent. Body cam footage showed the same agent immediately after the encounter, describing the injuries as, quote, nothing major. September 30th, some 300 federal agents raided an apartment building in the dead of night. Some repelled from a Black Hawk helicopter. And it's like, why do they have a Black Hawk helicopter, right? Some repelled from a Black Hawk helicopter positioned over the building, ransacked apartments, detained not only children, but several U.S. citizens, including Roderick Johnson, who spoke with Block Club Chicago. Roderick Johnson, who lives in the building and the U.S. citizen, said he heard, quote, people dropping on the roof, unquote, before agents kicked his door in. He was stuffed inside a van with his neighbor for what he felt like several hours until agents told them the building was clear. So they're snatching Americans. Like, this is like you just having sex with your girlfriend, wife, mistress, whatever. A booted thug kicks open the door, snatches you half naked, throws you into a van, and then later comes back and says, all right, all clear. What the hell? Like, that's astonishing. He also, October 4th, CPB agents shoot an unarmed woman. I guess this is Marmar Martinez. They claim that she provoked them by ramming their vehicle with the car. Martinez's lawyer later tells Chicago Sun-Times that there was body cam footage that shows the agent turning left into her vehicle, after which the agent says, quote, do something, bitch, unquote. The agent then gets out the vehicle and shoots Martinez. And if you want to see a picture of this, I don't even know if this was the same instance, but this happened the other day where the agent literally puts the gun out, aiming at a person. Right here, October 7th, mass federal agents caught on camera aiming a weapon at a resident who reportedly doing nothing more than documenting his activities. This act is reported by the Chicago Tribune reporter Laura Rodriguez Presa. And that is terrifying. No badge, can't see his face, aiming a gun at you, ready to end your life. Like, this is what they've been doing. This is lawless. This is completely lawless. There is not something that police that are in the area can do about this. Like, who has jurisdiction in these cities?
Well, in theory, the law enforcement personnel have jurisdiction. The local police has jurisdiction. But if the federal government comes in and says, we got it, we're going to take care of this, there's nothing local policemen can do. You know what I mean? They can't tell the Fed, what are they going to do? Get in a running gun battle with the feds and say you have to leave? They're not going to do it. When I see this stuff, my immediate thought is 4 words: welcome to Tel Aviv. You know what I mean? I'm looking at this. This is what it has looked like in the occupied territories. This is what it looks like. This is what it's like to be a Palestinian, where the police can come in, beat your door down, administratively detain you, not charge you with anything. You have no rights. And to me, it's inevitable. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. It's inevitable that as the United States, openly supports this kind of activity in Israel, that it's just like, and let's not forget that a lot of Israeli police and Israeli organizations have trained police in the United States. So I think what we're looking at is the Israelization, right? The Zionization of the U.S. streets, wherein the people now are viewed as the enemy, right? Basically, you look at it and say these people are the enemy, and like I said, you saw this coming. You know what I mean? Those of us who heard Joe Biden saying, yes, the MAGA people or domestic terrorists and all, we're like, yeah, I'm real worried about that kind of language. The government should not be demonizing the people. You can say I don't agree with these people, I disagree with them, or they're wrong, but when you start pointing to them saying they're domestic terrorists, that leads to a bad place. And of course Trump gets in, and to me, he ain't doing anything different from Biden. He's just now adding the next inevitable phase, the kinetic phase, where the government goes from talking about its enemies like enemies to treating its so-called enemies like enemies.
What's the next step for this? Because this is 1 year in, and I get the feeling this is a playbook. Meaning, I don't think this is random by any stretch of the imagination. It seems that Donald Trump is trying some kind of putsch attempt, some kind of takeover. And I know some people will be like, whoa, that's hyperbolic. I don't think that's hyperbolic at all. Trump is putting military, or doing his best to put military personnel in one city after the next, all across the United States, in Democratic strongholds and Democratic areas. And the question will be, well, why are you doing that? Like, are you doing that just because you think it's funny to do it? Or are you doing it because you have ulterior motives in the next phase of a particular plan, where you require those troops because you know you're going to get a massive amount of pushback in those particular cities when whatever that plan is revealed is actually revealed? I'm there on this. That's my point of view. I don't think this is random. I don't think this is Donald Trump wakes up on a Tuesday and decides to put military into Chicago, or put military into California, or put military into other random city. I think this is purposeful. What are your thoughts on it? You think I'm being too hyperbolic on this? Or
no, I'm going to, if you would be so kind, I'm going to share, if you would plop it up, an article that I covered a month ago. Pentagon planning rapid deployment reaction force to quell civilian dissent, right? Blah, 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 multi-million-dollar plan to create a domestic civil disturbance quick reaction force armed with weapons and riot gear, ready to be deployed instantaneously to quell civil unrest anywhere in the nation. And when that happened, when I saw that, my immediate thoughts, my immediate reaction was this. There's a large discussion about, hey man, we could be on our economy is on, treading on, walking on thin ice, that we could have some 2008 style thing or worse, right? The people in the US are like, we don't like this Gaza stuff, man, this is bad. And, we're seeing it start, the so-called left, or whatever you want to call it. We're seeing the right start to say, hey, you killed Charlie Kirk and things like that. We don't know. But, look, in the court of public appearance, the court of public opinion has convicted almost Bibi Netanyahu of strangling with his bare hands. You know what I mean? Convicted, right? So irregardless of all the information we don't have, the court of public opinion has made a decision. So as the people are like, this Israel thing, we don't like it, and the government's like, who cares, we're going to do this because this is what we do, because Israel is our number one priority, and you American voters are our last priority, right? What happens is people get more and more unhappy and start saying, well, hey, we will not comply with what you want, and we'll be, there could be actions in the cities, there could be people. Guess what? You need to put your troops there to put those things down, shall we say. So it is my belief that this is all, not just Trump, that this is the ruling elite saying we're getting further and further from what the American people want. and they don't like it. And we're not the kind of ruling elite people that just say, well, I guess we better change our direction we're going and give the people what we want. It is I've said this for years, the biggest fear of the ruling elite is always internal uprisings. That people will, pull out the pitchforks and the you know what I mean, the pitchforks and start building guillotines, right? So in my opinion, to sum it all up, it appears to me that there has been an ongoing plan. This is a movement to say, how are we going to prepare the ground so that when people start to rise up against us, we can quickly put that down. And what you need to do, two things. Think about it, coming from law enforcement and knowing how the thought process is, it's always two things. Okay, we've got this big riot, whatever. What does law enforcement always think? We got to find the people that started it. We got to find the riot leaders. We got to grab them, arrest them, and take them away. And then the riot will go away, right? We got to stop them, the brains behind it. That's the way they think. Okay, so you're putting together a rapid reaction force to deal with civil dissent. Meanwhile, you're getting the guys with the black helicopters, the guys, the smaller teams that are going to go out and say, Jamal and Garland are on YouTube all over the place saying, we've got to stand up to the ruling elite. We got to go to their houses, rappel down, grab the leaders and take them away, or whoever. You get my point. So I can see the setup for the big, we got to put down large areas of dissent. And also now you're seeing the smaller things. We got to go up and grab the people who are organizing this rally against Zionism or something, whatever, the war in Ukraine, whatever. So it just appears to me, I don't think that's a conspiracy theory based on what you lose the argument that this is a conspiracy theory when the government starts going to the streets, grabbing people out of their homes and dragging them away in the night with no warrant. That's pretty much like we're there. What do you think?
No, I agree with you. I look, you have my full agreement. Either one or two things. Either this is a playbook, meaning Trump is going through steps in regards to I am taking certain actions that I agreed with in advance, meaning, I need chips on, basically, you need troops on board if you're going to do anything big, right? And I'm going to put these in areas that I think will be the most resistant to it. As you point out, setting up your teams, you're getting the American public familiar with military being on domestic soil, something that is just an anathema to being an American. And you have effectively an entire wing of government, Department of Homeland Security, where you can snatch goons from in order to send those goons all across the United States. Okay, that's terrifying, right? Whether that's we expect something big to come down the pike, meaning an economic crash, some kind of policy that we know the public is not going to accept, whether it's Donald Trump decides, I am now king of America, the cultists and the fascists think that's great, the Democratic areas are going to think it's not great, in which case there's going to be a larger response, in which case you need people on the ground in order to deal with that. Whatever that is, he is obviously, and I'm saying it's not a conspiracy theory, because he is obviously putting troops in various cities across the country and is fighting courts in order to do so. And even if it's not military, he still has a grab bag of goons that he could effectively use to put in various hotspots across the United States. No, I don't think it's a conspiracy theory at all. I think it's because you're stuck with the question of why is he doing this? Obviously, there is not this kind of rioting on the streets. That's not taking place. You have murders that are being committed in other states and other cities that are higher than any of these places that he's putting people in. So it can't just be random. There has to be a rationale for it. Now, you can say, well, Trump is just tweaking the nipples of random Democrats. I don't buy that. I just don't buy the premise. So no, I agree with you. I think something big is coming down the pike, or they're expecting some level of resistance for whatever Trump is planning on doing. And I don't believe these plans are random. For God's sake, Stephen Miller is nearly a Nazi. And if you're getting to some of these other people, Rubio, all of these yes men, he surrounded himself with yes men who are just going to say, okay, Trump, whatever you want to do. When you have a government like that and there's no checks, there's no accountability, there's no political opposition, you effectively have a dear leader. So no,
I'll add this. The thing about Trump too is that, let's face it, he got on the campaign trail and just said whatever people wanted to hear. He's an entertainer. I'm going to stop the wars. I'm going to do this. I'm going to worry about the American first and all that. Oh, it was all lies. It was all lies because it didn't matter what he said, because once he got in office, he was a puppet. You know, I read somewhere that the Zionist billionaires gave him $500 billion. Trump's
Marianne
from New
Williamson.
York.
Not Marianne
You know,
Williamson.
yeah, well, totally together, these Zionist
Marianne.
billionaires, their donations total up to half $500 billion. So here's the thing. He's from New York.
Harrison.
He knows what time it is. He knew when he accepted that money that he would do. They gave it to him with the intent, we're giving you that money. When we call you and tell you to do something, you're going to do it. Well, you take the money. If the mafia calls and says, hey, Jamaro, we'd like to give you some money to help your channel, you know, that means that they're going to call you every so often and they're going to say, hey, we got a particular guy we need you to bring on your channel, and we need you to take this position or that position. And if you don't do it, they're going to kill you because they're the mafia. You understand that if you can take that money if you want, but you know what's behind it. Same with Trump. He knew what's behind it. Whatever he said on the campaign trail is irrelevant. It was all lies. It was, you know, but that's every, you know what I mean? That's Joe Biden telling us that, oh, yes, we've got to fix Obamacare with the public option and $20 minimum wage and all. That's what the president's job is, to lie like hell and tell you what you want to hear. They know what you want, so they're going to tell you that. That's what's so diabolical about it, that these guys know what you want. They clearly know what you want because they tell you that's what they're going to give you. And then as soon as they get in power, they say to their boss, donors, and masters, what do you want me to do? And whatever it is, they do it. And that's Trump. And the difference in Trump is he doesn't have the sense to know how to nuance this thing and to do like an Obama and smile and say it nicely and say, we're looking out for you. He just rambles on with the true fascism. That is the monster that you know, the ruling elite monster that controls him like a puppet and tells him what to do. He shows the fangs. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because in a way, the good thing about Trump is he don't have enough sense to hide it. He's like, I always put it like this. When you watch the vampire movie and the beautiful female vampire or the handsome male vampire, but just before they get ready to bite somebody, they turn into the truly evil looking demon and they bite the person and they can see him. The difference is Trump never gives you that beautiful vampire that seduces the person in. He's always the evil demon. You can look at him and you can say, that's a damn vampire right there. Look at the fangs. That's Trump.
Yeah, I'd be a sucker for that female.
That's
vampire.
why, you know, there are a lot of people like, Trump is evil. Trump is bad. Trump is this. And I'm like, Trump is the machine. You're looking at the machine. I don't look at Trump and say, I mean, and I understand that angers some people, but I don't look at Trump separate from the political situation. And I always say Donald Trump didn't come into American politics. He came out of American politics. He is what American politics creates when it is in its breaking of totalitarian fascist state. Some creep like Trump. If it wasn't Trump, it'd be another one. If he craps out, which I don't think he's going to, personally, I don't think Trump's going to make it mentally, if anything else. He seems like he's falling apart.
He's degrading. Yeah,
yes,
he's degrading.
desperately. At some point, he'll be out the door. And J.D. Vance, he knows how to smile. Mr. Palantir puppet, he knows how to smile. He knows how to say it nicer. He's worse than Trump.
Yes.
Because he's just as bad or worse when it comes to politics, because he's going to do what Peter Thiel tells him to do, but he's going to say it with a smile and he's going to sound friendly and like he's doing it for good. For Trump doesn't know how to do that. I'd rather have that evil demon of Trump who shows the fangs first. And I can say that's who he is. Huh? I
always say Vance is a better Trump than Trump. He's more coherent. He explains that stuff much better in a way that's more amenable to media. Whereas Trump is losing it. Like he doesn't see. Like, did you see that speech with the military with Hegseth?
Oh my God!
And Trump gets up there and goes on this rambling 70-something minute speech, and he's saying stuff like, "We need to send some of you to the cities. We're going to work this out. We're going to do it." Effectively telling the military, "We're going to put you on American soil to go after, ostensibly to kill Americans, because otherwise, what are you talking about? The military's job is to kill. That's what they're trained for, right?" Meaning you're training a guy to take a gun and shoot the enemy. You're going to kill the enemy. That was the entire point of Hegseth's speech. No more dealing with Geneva Convention. No more dealing with this other stuff. You're going to kill the enemy. You're going to lose weight. Go out there and kill the enemy.
Yes.
It's like fatties.
Did you know
It's
there
gonna
was an
be out.
article recently, and it was talked about, and I think they're starting to prepare. What I think is they're starting to prepare the groundwork for the inevitable. There was an article recently that said something about, yes, some people around Trump say that he's starting to, he's not as sharp as he was, and that
Yes,
sometimes
I saw that.
when he'll start talking about subjects and he'll just switch from one to the next to the next. Like when they ask him about Charlie Kirk, hey, what about Charlie Kirk? Yes, he was my friend, and I mean, blah blah, I miss him, whatever. Hey, look, we're building a new ballroom, right?
Yeah.
Like his brain, he never always had issues with maintaining attention to one thing, but now his brain is just going, boom, let's jump to this, let's jump to that. And I think it's less about, when I listen to Trump, it's less about what he said, because he rambles. And even if Trump said something today, he'll do a 180 tomorrow. So I don't be like, oh no, Trump said this, therefore, no, God knows what the hell he said. Tomorrow he'll be like, yes, Putin's evil and I hate him. The next day, oh my God, he says he's evil. The next day Trump will go, I think we can get a deal with that Putin. He's a nice guy. I always liked him. So you got to ignore it. The content is much, but if you listen to him, like you're saying, if you don't listen so much to the content and you're like, he's rambling all over the place. What the hell is he talking about? I don't know. Apparently he doesn't know. You start to realize. So I think you're going to see more and more articles that start saying, perhaps Trump isn't as sharp as he used to be. So as they slowly prepare us for the ground, because we got to this Biden 2.0. We put a 79-year-old guy in who, just eats Coca-Cola and fries and Big Macs every day. That ain't good for you.
Yeah, I saw that. I think it was Seymour Hersh wrote that article where he was talking about how he seems out of it. I mean, he looked bad. And it's funny, the first term, Trump didn't seem to be degrading. He seemed to have handled the presidency in the sense of physically better than many other presidents. If you look at Obama's first term and when he ended, Joe Biden obviously degraded like a match, just burning down over the course. Like every minute, Joe Biden was degrading. Stuff was falling off of him like he was some kind of leper. This time around, not so much. I don't know if it's because he's trying to do so much. I don't know if it's the strain. I don't know if it's the constant lying and having to, at some point keep those lies straight. He's not handling this well, not in the way that he did the first time around. But I guess in this time, it's more naked also. I don't know if it was because the whole Trump and Russia stuff was kind of corralling him in some respects. But you're right. The fangs are up. This is not, the female vampire who seduces you and you want to be seduced. And you see the fangs and you think to yourself, okay, you can bite me. It's okay. Yeah, it's not that, right? Like some of those vampire flicks, you'd be like, I see the fangs, but I'm okay with being bit. She's hot.
Yeah, exactly. It's like your friend's like, hey, she's a vampire. You're like, yeah, but man, she sure looks good in that dress, dude. I mean, right. Okay, nobody's perfect. Maybe we can work something out.
Right. Everybody has their downsides, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I can live with this. She just needs a little bit of blood every so often, and we're good. That's not this. This is different. And what's wild to me about it are the cultists and the fascists. And what I mean by that is, if you look at what's taking place in Chicago or where he's trying to send military, and your response is, great job, Trump is going after the terrorists from Antifa. You're a fascist. You're a fascist. You're a cultist.
You know what? The other part of it is, there are other people you're a brainwashed, you're dealing with the cult of personality. You know what I mean? So you have a cult of personality people who, and I know people who are Republicans and Democrats. Anything my party or my guy does, things that I have opposed my entire life that I tell everybody I'm against. But once my party or my guy does it, I'm for it. Like the Democrats who loved Liz Cheney.
Yep.
Because she said a few bad words against Trump. Well, I don't like Trump. Why did she hate Trump so bad? Because he wasn't neocon enough for her at the time. But the Democrats were like, oh, Liz Cheney hates Trump. Oh, she's great. She's a true American. Democrats were literally saying she should run as the VP. Remember that?
Yeah.
Kamala. And I was like, yeah, she probably should, because their ideologies are technically aligned. You know what I mean?
I call those people cultists too, by the way.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't like put them in boxes in this case. I think all of these people are dangerous when they do that, because it means that you care less about the country than you do about your own political ambitions, your own political party. It becomes an issue of power at that point. It's not about,
they don't care what Trump does. Whatever Trump says, it can be things that they have opposed forever. Think about these people. A lot of MAGA people who still are on board with whatever Trump does. things that they have opposed fundamentally politically: government overreach, government interference. I'm opposed to, the government being in our business. Okay, Trump's in power. Anything the government does is fine now because I like Trump and he's in power. You know what I mean? It's people. You see that in politics. That's why I refer to these parties as brainwashed cults. Now, the good thing is, I think there are some MAGA people that are waking up saying, hey, I don't like this. Hey, so that's good. People like Trump sometimes, and Biden, but people like these just freaks, fascist lunatics will, in fact, I think, wake up some people who will say, hey, I think this has gone too far.
You think so?
There are some, yeah, I've seen, but haven't you seen the video of that lady on, it's a Twitter video, and she's saying, she was a MAGA person saying, I voted for Trump. This is a psyop. He told us there would be no war. He told us and she's going off on exactly what you would expect a person a MAGA person who really believes in what they say, and she goes off on it. And I'm like, that's, there's some people saying, yeah, I've been had. And I think that's a good thing.
I see a few of those. What is it? Marjorie Taylor Greene sounds like a lefty these days. Yeah. She's like, they're going after the WIC benefits. I mean, she has been, I'm like, who is a socialist? Like,
but you got to say, some of these people at least are consistent with what they thought before. They're not saying, I was for this, and now that Trump is in, I'll just change. They're like, hey, wait, whoa. Like those of us.
I accept that. Meaning, I can accept somebody who's true MAGA. Because what is in America's best interest, right? That's the entire point. I can accept that. Even if I disagree on some of this stuff, at least it's kind of like a Ron Paul or Rand Paul.
Yes.
You're consistent. I can accept you being consistent, even if I disagree with you. I know that you're going to hit the note each time, which I can predict, and I understand that you're doing that. These other people who, oh yes, I'm anti-war because Trump is anti-war, then Trump gets in, bombs Iran, is murdering people in Venezuela, starts the war in Yemen, and they're like, but Trump is fighting for America and he's fighting the globalists. So, he's playing 20-dimensional chess. It's like, okay, dude. It's like, stop.
Alex Jones, who's talked about George Bush lying us into war and weapons of mass destruction. Alex Jones. And then Trump does exactly the same thing. Yes, Venezuela has weapons of mass destruction. No, I tell you what, we're going to go this time with, we'll go with the drug cartel. Yeah, there we go, because they got lots of oil. So he cooks up a lie, an obvious and blatant lie, to steal the war of Venezuela, steal the oil from Venezuela. And Alex Jones, yes, Trump's going after dictator Maduro in Venezuela. And I'm like, the last time you called it out as a lie.
Yep.
Now this time, because your guys, and the exact same scenario, lie the American people into a war so you can steal. This is Trump's George W. Bush moment. And there's Alex Jones doing a 180. Okay, well, I'll support it now. As if there's anybody on the planet who doesn't really know, Venezuela's got a lot of oil. And the last time when Trump went out of office, do you remember that? When he got out, he said, yeah, we should have went to Venezuela. They're close. They got all of this oil. He in the past said we should have stole their oil. Now he comes in and says, we're going to steal their oil, but here's a cockamamie reason. And Alex Jones pretends like he believes it. It's exactly what we're saying about these people who have no foundation. Nothing.
Just amazing. Yeah, I didn't realize Alex Jones had flipped like that. Alex Jones, I watched him do, I think Trump was in office. And it was when Trump first got in office, first time around, and bombed Syria. And that was the first time I really watched Alex Jones. Like where I wasn't watching him for jokes and like gay frogs and stuff like this. He came on and he did this like 30-minute monologue that I was impressed. I was sitting there like, whoa, this guy has talent. I don't think it was planned. I don't think he wrote it. Meaning, I think he just kind of off the top of his head did this scathing monologue on Donald Trump attacking Syria, saying, "Are you out of your effing mind? How are you attacking Syria in this case? These people are fighting the ISIS fighters and everything else." And he is like brutal in that. And I'm sitting there like, this is an impressive monologue. And the reason I say he didn't write it is, when you have a stream of consciousness, there are times where you reach kind of a point where you need to leap to another point. And the fact that that point was there means you didn't write that. You just did it off the top of your head. And so the fact that he's immediately flipped on Epstein, flipped on Venezuela, flipped on it, and he's like, okay, dude, what the hell are you doing? What the hell are you doing? Be consistent. Thomas Massey, what is that comedian? Dave Smith, Joe Rogan even is like, hey, this is not what I voted for. This is not what I wanted. All of these people at the very least have some level of integrity of like, this is not what we were sold. We were sold a bill of goods. But then you have to ask the question, how do you keep being sold a bill of goods? Why are you believing this guy? But let me ask you this, and just to make this point, this shocked the hell out of me and made me question what the hell is this country? So CNN does a poll. CNN always does polls. Look at this. They asked the people, hey, what do you think of Trump right now? With everything that's going on, the tariff war, the fact that your bills are going up, the fact that the dollar is depreciating, the fact that he's effectively ripping off the treasury with this kind of crypto scam that he's engaged in, where his family is engaged in. He's like, what do you mean? That's my kids. That's not me. It's like, dude, are you serious right now? You're going after Joe Biden for the whole Hunter Biden bereavement stuff, but we're supposed to pretend that your kids are directly in crypto where you're not getting a kickback from this crypto. Meaning all of this stuff is taking place. You have raids on buildings where ICE and military is all around the world. All around the country. He has ended no wars. He has ended no wars. We're still in Ukraine, bombing Iran, bombing Yemen, failed in Yemen, by the way, meaning we lost that. And now going after Venezuela. Okay, American public, what do you think of Donald Trump?
Trump. You know, you go back to October of 2024, 44% of the American public viewed him favorably. Now, despite everything, look at this, 43%, which is well within the margin of error of that 44%. And here's the thing to keep in mind. This was good enough to get Trump reelected back in 2024. And Donald Trump is basically at the same point here right now, which I think would surprise a lot of folks, especially a lot of folks on the left who very much disagree with a lot of what Donald Trump has done.
But what do you see is underneath that and driving that? Why is he basically the same?
Okay, you know, to quote the esteemed caller, Dennis Green, the former head coach in the National Football League, Donald Trump is who the voters thought he was. What are we talking about here? Well,
48% is Donald Trump doing what he promised. 52% says yes, he is doing exactly what we thought, meaning he is exactly who we thought he was. And his polling has effectively stayed put for over a year. Is that really what America wants?
You know, here's the problem when it comes to polling, to be frank. And you know, I guess I'm discrediting the polls. So back when I was at Fox, I used to talk to some people who ran polls and did polls, and this is what they did. When I was at Fox, you had a lot. What I discovered, I'll make it quick, was there are a lot of people in the machine that get paid. You know what I mean? Their job is to get people elected. Their job is to get money moved around, to handle the polls, to do all the things that they need. I found out that, you know, there's a number of politicians out there that have a number. If you want, you know, there are a number of political people in power that if you want their endorsement, they got a number. 25, 50, 100,000, right? So you'll hear so-and-so endorsed Garland Nixon. Well, what you know is I just gave that guy 50 grand because that's his number, right? You learn all of the inside stuff there. And that's pretty routine. You know, you want a pardon, 2 million. That's the number. The last I heard.
Talked about that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, and that's the corruption. Okay. So my point is, what I was told about polls is, see who's paying for the poll. This was the guy who was in charge of polls. Somebody comes along, they're paying for polls. Kind of, you learn how to. If I have a polling company and you come to me, Garland, I want to poll on this subject. I'm going to ask you questions, and the questions, in a way, are going to say this. Yes. What do you want this poll to say? Right. You know what I mean? It's going to be in them. Yeah, but, you know, I'm not going to come out and say, what do you want this poll to say? You're paying me. Well, you know, the poll is $500,000 for me to do this poll, blah, 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 blah. Depending on what you wanted to say, it could go up to 7, 8, 900,000. If you're asking me to say for this poll to say something that I know the people don't want, right? It's going to be like, well, it's going to be harder for me to make a poll, and I have to make a whole lot more calls, and I'm going to do this poll over and over and over until I get the right result. So it's going to be a lot more work for me to make a poll to say that everybody under the age of 20 is in favor of Israel or something. You want that poll? I can give it to you, but it's going to cost you a lot. Do you know how many damn calls I'm going to have to make before I get that?
It's like 90% Zionism.
Exactly. So my point is, when I see these polls, I do understand that if you want a poll to say anything, you can get it to say it.
But this is CNN. They hate.
Yeah, which is my point exactly. You know what I mean?
Oh, so you
You're
think the
talking-
number's higher? You think it's more than 52%?
No. I'm saying I don't know what the real number is.
Okay.
I'm saying
Okay.
I don't trust these polls that I see because depending on what they want them to say, particularly now that was at Fox, and these were people that do conservative polls, and that's the
Right.
game. So when you see these polls, it's I don't know. I suspect. Yeah, you know what's interesting about it? You notice you really hardly ever see that many polls about Israel or Zionism or Gaza. You know what I mean? Where are all the polls on that?
Well, there are a few, and they have pointed out that the perspective of the United States, I can show you about 5.
Yeah,
all of them point out that the perspective of the U.S. is diminished significantly.
Yeah, but you don't see CNN. Yeah, go ahead.
CNN hates Trump, though.
Yeah.
And if we're going with the polling thing, the polling was right about the election. They were dead on in regards to Trump maintaining a lead over the course of the election, eventually winning it. They got the wrong scale. And maybe they didn't even get it wrong scale when you think about it at the end result. In regards to how close it was, electoral college-wise, he killed her. When you got to just the numbers, it was far closer. But the polling was right on that. And look, I'm not disagreeing with you. I agree. If you're looking at Rasmussen always has a bias towards a Republican. If you're looking at some other one, there's always a bias towards the left. It depends on the polling. I guess I'm trying to point out, though, is within context, CNN hates Trump. I guess since CNN would have loved for that poll to say that 20% of the public backs Donald Trump.
Unless I'm starting to think about the midterms, and I want to make sure that the Democrats see things are neck and neck, and we got a chance. See, as I move towards the midterms, I want everything to say it's neck and neck, and we got a chance to beat Trump.
I see.
But everybody's got to get out. If I show Trump polls that say Trump's way ahead, then people will say, well, there's no point in me voting because we can't. If I show Trump that polls that say, well, Trump's way behind, everybody hates him, then people will say, well, I don't necessarily have to vote. I can if I want to, but we're easily going to defeat Trump and his minions. But if I say it's neck and neck and everybody's got to get out there, it's 50-50. You might be the last person that needs to vote.
Your one vote can change all of us. Yeah.
So I think you'll start to see more and more polls that say it's neck and neck as we, think about it. It's almost November. November is going to be the primaries. Everything's going on. They're scared to death in the primaries. They're going to say that Jamarl Thomas, who's running against some Zionists, saying you can't do that. You can't vote for him because he'll lose to the Republicans. You got to keep the same Democrat. Don't change horses in the middle of the stream. We got to do everything we can to beat Trump. So I expect a lot of manipulation. I don't think that Trump is all that popular anymore. I think that I just look at it, what's happening, and all the Charlie Kirk stuff and all the Israel stuff. It's killing him.
But
so maybe that's true, but I don't know.
That's what I was going to say. Let's say that that's true. Let's pretend for the moment that CNN is not hiding.
Yeah.
That CNN actually did the poll and just said, hey, whatever result comes back, comes back.
Yeah.
And they're looking at it and they're like, holy shit. 52% of America said this is what we voted for. This is exactly what we thought this guy was. Mm-hmm. And what does that say about the country? Because what's interesting to me about it, you might be right. This may be a foolish poll. Fair enough. Agreed. And usually you have to look at multiple polls to see kind of where they average out. 1,000% agreed. Yeah, that full agreement. What's more interesting to me in this, though, is if this poll is right, what the F does this mean about this country and the people? The idea that people said, we voted for the war to continue. We voted for tariffs to be enacted on everybody, which, by the way, nobody said that was going to take place. We voted for increased prices at the grocery store and higher inflation. We voted for weak job numbers. We voted for all of this stuff. That's what we voted for. That's what we thought we were getting for Trump. That can't be the case. Meaning, when they're answering that, they have to be answering something very specific. They're not I don't think they're calling people who are all political analysts who are following this stuff. They're following people who have probably one or two things in mind that they're thinking of, saying, yeah, this is about what I expected. What does that mean for this country, though?
I think one positive, like as you said, let's discuss it as though this poll is completely valid, because I've said maybe it's not valid, but we got to discuss it as though it's valid. I think one of the things that we have to think about is this. the political sophistication of the American electorate, which I don't rank as really, really high. I think that, one of the interesting things, traveling to poor countries, right? Traveling to countries that are American, that are struggling because of American sanctions and policies, deliberately to hurt them. I think that Americans are not very politically sophisticated. You travel the world. And you go to some of these poor countries and you talk to these people and they know politics and they know the America better to hell than Americans know it. And you come home and Americans are politically ignorant, not stupid. I don't say stupid. I say politically ignorant. They are lied to repeatedly, yet they believe what they're told. They think the Republicans and the Democrats are fighting each other. They're opposing opposition parties that are struggling against each other in a life and death struggle. And I'm like, yeah, that's bull crap there. This is imperialism. So I put on my left shoe and my right shoe. They're both running in the same direction. Right. You know what I mean? Right. So I think part of it is the lack of political sophistication, the lack of knowledge, and the political ignorance of Americans, not due to Americans, not that I'm saying Americans are stupid or ignorant of their own accord, but the level of propaganda from Russiagate to the rest of this bull crap that we get, to Larry Ellison and they're buying TikTok, they're doing everything they can to influence our conversation and keep us ignorant. We're propagandized and ignorant, and that's part of what we're seeing in it's frustrating for people like us who try to evaluate politics on a broad intellectual and philosophical scale. And we're just trying to talk to different people from parts of the world and scratching our heads. Well, what do you think it means? We're trying to figure it out, as opposed to the idiots who think they got all the answers. They're not trying to learn anything. They already know all the answers. And when you listen to their answers, you roll your eyes. That's all you can do.
I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, me too.
I really have. And just so the audience will know, every Wednesday, 9:15, Garland is going to be joining. We're going to share it on both channels. Yeah, I've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed this. I've missed this.
Always.
I really have. And just for the audience, Garland Nixon. Garland Nixon is a political analyst, radio host, YouTube channel. His channel, Garland Nixon, on YouTube. Also, as I see you in events all the time. I think it was last month or so that you were at an event. No, man, I always appreciate you joining me. Always appreciate the audience loves you to death. And so you have a fantastic rest of your day. By the way, when is your next show? Just so the audience would know.
Geez, I'd have to look at my calendar. I don't even know.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough.
I'd have to look at my calendar. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I know I'm got to get a haircut in a half an hour, and I barely keep up with anything. Oh, wait a minute, I'm going to be on Danny Highfong today on his channel at 1:00 with a couple other people. I think maybe.
So what time are you going to be on Danny's?
1 p.m. Eastern time today.
Okay. Check
I forgot who's even over. I know Andre Martianov is the one.
Okay.
So, all right. Yep. Danny Highfong today at 1.
Garland, you have a fantastic rest of your day, man.
All right. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, man. Bye-bye. All right. Garland is fantastic. Garland is fantastic. Yeah, it's going to be every Wednesday, 9:15. Garland will be here. And so it's great having him back on. I always enjoy these conversations with Garland. And I put it at 9:15. That way, if it goes longer, it can go beyond the show. It shouldn't be an issue. So shout out to Garland. Shout out to Garland. He is fantastic. Garland is the one that got me in radio. He will have my thanks forever for that. He will have my thanks forever. Let's go to the chat. We've come to the end. We're going to end on a strong note. We have Fahad Haroon. Have you watched Michael Moore's documentary, Fahrenheit 9/11? Hey, the Bin Laden family was secretly flown out of the United States when nobody else could fly. Yes. Fahrenheit 9/11 is damn good. It's damn good. If you want to see how screwed up your government is, Fahrenheit 9/11 will do it. Combine it with Tucker Carlson's documentaries on 9/11. There need to be payment in blood. There needs to be payment in blood. That's how enraging that is. Because it makes it clear that regardless of how far you want to go with 9/11, whether you think it was an inside job specifically where the CIA blew up buildings, or whether you think, and it's not even a think issue at this point, the CIA literally was running an operation in the United States where they brought terrorists into the country with the idea of trying to flip those terrorists while losing control of it, not even alerting the FBI that they were in the country. And then the moment that the towers were hit, they went into this burn everything, hide everything, blame the Saudis, blame Al Qaeda, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And immediately went to this war footing of, we now have to kill a lot of people because of our own intransigence. One warning after the next was taking place day by day by day, even up to the point of the day before where the US government says, stop telling me about the Al-Qaeda stuff. And then a day or so later, we'll get hit on 9/11. Just fascinating. Watch the Tucker Carlson thing. It is amazing. Red Dye. Thank you for both of these memberships. You have my deepest appreciation. Pink Rose. Never trust the US and even less Israel. I would say don't trust either. If they tell you it is raining, go check outside immediately. Diane Thomas, Jamal. The show has been great. Oh, greatest. And I thank you. Oh, thank you, Mama Thomas. I appreciate it. IDF just want to fight children. They are sick. Fight, you mean murder or kill. And for any of you who said, well, wow, man, that's pretty aggressive. Do you realize that the murders and the killings might be up to over 600,000? This is according to Francesca Albanese. Let's say it's half. Let's say it's 300,000. Let's say it's 200,000 that have been killed, meaning people. 40% of those are children. This is ritualistic murder of kids for our own public consumption. You can watch videos of kids having their head blown off, arm blown off, meaning this is something that we're watching with our own eyes while the entire world effectively watches this genocide take place, the majority or the large share of which are just kids. So when they're going into that building and those kids are in that building, those kids are not safe. These people are maniacs. Basically, closest thing to Nazis that we have in our current political context. And I mean this even beyond the Ukrainians. Frank Friel, I don't think Trump and Western oligarchs like Israel at all, or else they wouldn't be so willing to sacrifice in a conflict with Iran. So there are two ways to look at that. In one sense, you could say, why do you have to pay hundreds of millions of dollars if these people are already on your side? Meaning, if I agree with you and I agree with your premise, you don't have to give me $500 million, right? Because I agree with your premise. If I don't necessarily agree or I don't care, then you may have to pay me, and you may have to pay me very well. Why are those influencers getting $7,000 a post? Why do they pay hundreds of millions of dollars in regards to Congress in order to get certain people out or keep certain people in? Why do they have these organizations where they start paying people early when they get into Congress? If you agree, you don't have to pay people that much money. So, Frank, you're not entirely wrong on this. By the same token, Christian evangelists do care. They care because they want to see Jesus return, and they want to see the destruction of Israel in order for Jesus to be returned, him riding in on a bull or bear or something like that, bare-chested. I'm your God. Bow before Jesus. It's like, whoa, Jesus riding on a goddamn bear. Look at his abs. Those people are lunatics. I mean, they're breeding cows, breeding red fucking cows, because even a miracle needs a hand. And in this case, again, all of this stuff fits into context of prophecy. And so in their mind, the prophecy stuff needs to be in play. Israel needs to exist for the prophecy to be in play, in which case Jesus can return and destroy the world. 6 billion people dead so they can transcend to heaven. There are questions to be asked about that, right? It's like, hey, you guys are backing the genocide for this. So you're okay with the murder of women, children, babies, etc. And you believe you're Jesus. That has a book, by the way, of references to that Jesus and the things that Jesus said and the way that Jesus lived. And you think that he's okay with that. That's interesting. That's very interesting. But nevertheless, you know, some of these people are true believers. Some of these people do so for virtue signal thing. It's their identity. And because it's their identity, they wed themselves to that particular identity, as if some divine being is going to be okay with them murdering all of these people short of some kind of demonic entity. But it doesn't necessarily stop their actions, doesn't necessarily stop them from doing what they're doing. My point is, yes, some of these people are paid to perform, kind of like a prostitute. Not even a good one, like an OnlyFans one. Others are true believers. The ones that are true believers are terrifying. The ones that are paid are disgusting. So, either way you look at it, anywhere you are is where you're at on this. The fact of the matter is, if you're spending that much money, it's not that you have a belief set where people agree. If you're spending that much money, it's to compel and to control. There's a difference in those things. So, Frank, I don't think you're entirely wrong, but some of these people are lunatics. So, Mark, I think this is Mark. Mark Pugliese. Garsex, we turned into Israel. I've been saying it for years. Oh, Garland says we're turning into Israel. We're turning into a police state. That's not because of Israel, per se. We are a violent country. We're a very violent country. You look at the level of gun violence. You look at the level we had just had Warwick Powell on. He was talking about the increase in sales of bulletproof glass and these kind of defensive measures. Social interaction in regards to trust is low. You have military that's been exported all throughout the world that we're okay with. So we're okay with bombing other countries. We're okay with murdering Venezuelan fishermen. We're okay with murdering North Koreans when Donald Trump is supposed to be going to make a peace deal. We're okay with this stuff. We don't take issue with this stuff. It's like, oh, Donald Trump just murdered 11 people. Well, let me go have sex with my wife. Let me go pay Xbox. It's that. We don't care in real terms. We're fine with Trump bombing Iran. We don't take issue with him doing that. We're fine with 1.7 million Ukrainians being dead. And we just blame the Russians and say, hey, well, it's the Russians' fault for doing it. Missing everything that led up to the provocations and everything else, not to mention the deals, the agreements. And we have a media that is a propaganda apparatus that Goebbels would blush over. Germany never had that level of control over their population in the way that they have on the U.S. population. When Caleb was talking about Kim Jong-un and how they make him look like he's crazy. Like, if you got into a fight and you were fighting somebody because they slapped your wife, and when the media reported it, the only thing they showed is you flipping out. And they're like, God, that guy's lost his mind. That is the way the media functions in the United States. It is radically biased in regards to issues that it covers. It is not there to give you truth. What is Mark Twain? I think he made the point, and I could be wrong on this, on the attribution. But you watch the media to be informed of what they're talking about, not to be informed. And if you watch it to be informed, you're going to be misinformed. It's that. The fact that that was true in his day gives this kind of context to the way the media functions currently in the United States. So, I guess my point is this. We have a country that exports violence all across the world. And the country doesn't take issue with the fact that they export violence all across the world. Then that becomes a way that you look at the world. And is there really that great distinction between the way you look at the world and the way you look at yourselves, especially when the people who are in power don't see you as being the same? They see themselves as being oligarchs. They can go to their outlets. They can do this stuff. The people who are paying your political actors are different from you in the way that they conceive of themselves. So, no, if you're sending your goons in order to get resources for those businesses and everything else, and you see a situation in this country where the freedoms and everything else is starting to get curtailed because the amount of the pie is no longer available where that pie can grow as it was, let's say, in the 60s, 50s, or whatever, then yeah, you're right up on the chopping block. Look at the way the United States is looking at Europe. Europe was perfectly okay with using Ukraine as a battering ram to go after the Russians. Do you honestly think that the United States considers Europe to be equals? And do you honestly think that the United States would not feed Europe to the Russians every bit as much as they fed the Ukrainians to the Russians if we can gain something out of it? Obviously we'll do it. We don't give a shit about the Europeans in that sense. We consider them vassals. Look at the way Trump treats them or talks to them. I mean, the height of this is when Trump is like, or I think Benson came out and said, we're charging the Europeans 10% more on the weapons just because. We don't even know what we're going to use it for, but fuck it. They're Europeans. What are they going to do? But they're going to buy our weapons at a 10% markup. That's humiliating. That's a level of disrespect that's breathtaking. We don't care. And I'm saying in the same way that we look at them and we don't care, the people who are paying people like Vincent or Bassett, however you pronounce his name, are the same people who pay Democrats, same people who pay Republicans, and they are paid in order to get tax cuts, tax breaks, benefits on their businesses, and yes, for the military to go gallivanting around the globe in order to get their hands on resources, like in Venezuela, if they can get their hands on oil or mineral wealth. I'm saying they don't care about you. They don't care about you. And the sooner people realize that, the better off people would be. Your political party, I don't give a shit what party it is, does not give one iota of a shit about you. Your country is radically broken at this point. And this is not me hating on America. Maybe it is, but it's not. If somebody's screaming that your house is on fire, you can't be mad at the guy who's screaming that the house is on fire. Your government can't even keep the lights on, which is almost like, 101, government 101. Keep the lights on. Oh, right. I guess we got to keep the lights on, right? They can't even do that. Cutting the NASA budget. I mean, I can go through the stuff, but I'm trying to point out the capabilities that this country had, let's say 40 years ago, are not the capabilities that we have today. And these things are just basic things. I mean, the idea you can't build high-speed rail, or, the energy grid being all screwed up, or your manufacturing base has been diminished. And yet you're still trying to go around the world gallivanting, creating wars potentially, despite the fact that you don't have the capacity to fight those wars. I don't know. It's fucked up. It's sick. Let's keep going. Whoa. How do I pronounce your name? Shahzad Morgan. I just say Morgan. Thank you, Morgan. Honestly, thank you. I watch both of your channels every day. Thank you for excellent reporting. Thank you, man. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. It is a complicated thing keeping the channel going, especially when you're by yourself and you're doing so many interviews and everything else. And then you add to it homelessness, which is kind of funny, but it's not. Thank you. I appreciate it. I do appreciate it. What is this one? And man, I'm going to butcher this name. Jungle Gin. I think the D is silent in this. Am I safe in Australia? Yes, you are safe in Australia. Australia is I think you are. I have several guests from Australia. I haven't been in Australia for, Jesus, I think it was like 30. So what is that? 18 years? Yeah, it's been a while. I'm going to say yes, but still, be careful. Pink Rose, Jesus riding on a bear showing his bad. I find it ridiculous what these people believe and don't care to see people being killed. Well, it's wild, right? Like, I was brought up in the church, unfortunately, for better or for worse. I used to like the preaching. The singing used to be weird to me. It's like, what are you people singing about? But the preaching I used to get, right? Because that's a direct transfer of information, especially if the information has some value. It's like you take out the God stuff, but sometimes there are parables and there are things in there that actually have some kind of value that may be interesting. I am unaware of Jesus being okay for the murder of a large number of people. God is a bit of a lunatic. Agreed. God lied to Adam and Eve. Oh, there's that. It was fucking fascinating. But God was a bit of a lunatic in the Bible. But I don't remember Jesus being that guy. I don't remember. Yeah, the murder of women and children, that's perfectly okay if you're doing it to bring me back. It's like, no, that's not the way that works. I don't even know how they justify that position. All of these people being murdered and slaughtered, and yet they somehow remain white as snow, and their transcendental values on why this is okay. They're fucking lunatics. So yeah, Pink Rose, agreed. Absolutely agree. Jungle Gin, let's see, what's after a police state? Is that the bottom? I think America becomes something else. I think you end up with a civil war over a police state, frankly. Or at the very least, there's some kind of breaking up of this country in a way that creates a different country in some way. I could be wrong, but you could try to create a police state. You can also try to get a civil war. If you try to do that, you have no idea where the soldiers are going to all follow those orders. You have no idea what cops are going to do who are heavily armed in these various places, who may actually have a conscience and say, fuck this, I'm going to defend my hometown. You never know what these people are going to do on an individual basis when you create a fracture like that among, let's say, the various aspects of military, police, etc. I don't doubt that your DHS goons will probably follow orders. They may. Your military may fracture. Your police force may fracture. I don't know. I can't answer that. That's a tough one to answer, Jungle Jim. I don't know. By the same token, we can't keep going like this. Can't keep going like this. All right. We have come to the end. I want to thank all of you for joining me. You all are fantastic. Greatest group ever. Thank you for your support. You can do so, PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats, Buy Me a Coffee. All of these things help the channel, keep this channel ticking along. Shout out to my guests, Garland Nixon. He is fantastic. As I always said, Garland got me in the radio. He has my thanks forever for that. To the day I breathe my last breath, that last breath will be thanks, Garland. I know that's two breaths, but you get my point. Shout out to Piers Robinson. Shout out to Caleb Maupin. You all have a fantastic day. Be kind to the degree that you can be kind. Oh, wait, Pink Rose snuck one in. Imagine the day after Jesus comes back. So what now? Well, Pink Rose, according to them, when Jesus comes back, all of us die. All of us fucking die. In fact, I don't even think we die. I think we're in what they call it, end days, where beasts and demons walk the earth. What else? Beasts and demons walk the earth. The mark of the beast, where people have to get a mark. That's almost like the digital registration that they're talking about in Britain, and probably try to do something here, like the ID that the Trump administration is trying to get people to use. It's like a low form of that. No, there's a whole mythology that goes along with Jesus returning up to the point where it's all destroyed. Everybody dies. The faithful are raised to heaven in the rapture. And we are stuck on earth trying to figure shit out as demons walk the earth. And Antichrist effectively takes over. Yeah, good times. Good times. You all have a fantastic rest of your day. Be safe. Be kind to the degree that you can be kind. Have a good one all.